Abstract. The practice of listening to subtle inner sounds during meditation to concentrate and elevate the mind has a long history in various religions around the world, including Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism. Today there are a number of new religious movements which have made listening to the inner sound current a cornerstone of their teachings. These groups include the Radhasoamis and their various branches, the Divine Light Mission, Eckankar, MSIA, Masterpath, Sawan Kirpal Mission, Kuan Yin Qinghai, Manavta Mandir, and a number of others. In this study, we will provide a historical and comprehensive overview of these movements and how they have incorporated listening to the inner sound as part of their spiritual discipline. We are particularly interested in the distinctive and nuanced ways that each group teaches how to listen to the inner sound current and how, in turn, they interpret such in their own unique theologies. Introduction. The practice of listening to subtle inner sounds during meditation to concentrate and elevate the mind has a long history in various religions around the world, including Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, and other spiritual movements. Several books have explored the idea of mystical sound, including Guy L. Beck's Sonic Theology, Hinduism and Sacred Sound, Columbia, University of South Carolina Press, 2009, Kirpal Singh's Naam or Word, Sanbornton, Sant Bani Press, 1974, and Hazrat Inayat Khan's The Mysticism of Sound and Music, Revised Edition, Boston and London, Shambhala, 1996. Even Western-based religious traditions, particularly certain Gnostic schools, have mentioned listening to a divine melody which lifts the soul up to higher regions. In the trimorphic protonoia, it is described in the following way: I am the Word who dwells in the ineffable silence. I dwell in undefiled light, and a thought revealed itself perceptibly through the great sound. And it, the sound, exists from the beginning in the foundations of the all. But there is a light that swells hidden in silence, and it was the first to come forth. I alone am the Word, ineffable, incorruptible, immeasurable, inconceivable. It, the Word, is a hidden light, being unreproducible, an immeasurable light, the source of all. It is foundation that supports every movement of the eons that belong to the mighty glory. It is the founding of every foundation. It is the breath of the powers. It is the eye of the three permanences, which exist as a voice by virtue of a thought, and it is a word by virtue of the sound. Our I, the Word, became a foundation for the all. Andrea D. M. Lane, The Gnostic Mystery, a connection between ancient and modern mysticism. Walnut, Mount San Antonio College, 1992, 2015, page 45. Later, Christian mystics reported hearing a divine melody when enraptured in prayer. As Richard Rolle of the 14th century confessed in his mystical treatise Fire of Love, I was sitting, forsooth, in a certain chapel, and while I was finding great delight in the sweetness of prayer or meditation, suddenly I felt within me an unwonted and pleasant heat. And though at first I wavered, doubting for a long time whence it might be, I became convinced that it was not from the creature, but from the Creator, because I found it grow more warm and pleasant. But when half a year, 3 months, and some weeks had passed by, during which that warmth of surpassing sweetness continued with me, there was borne in on my perception a heavenly spiritual sound, which pertains to the song of everlasting praise and the sweetness of the invisible melody. Invisible I call it because it can be neither known nor heard except by him to whom it is vouchsafed, and he must first be purified and separated from the world. For while I was sitting in the same chapel and chanting psalms at night before supper as I could, I heard as it were the tinkling music of stringed instruments, or rather of singers, over my head. And while my whole heart and all my desires were engrossed in prayer and heavenly things, suddenly, I know not how, I felt within a symphony of song, and I overheard a most delightful heavenly harmony, which remained in my mind. For straightway, while I meditated, my thought was turned into melody of song, and for meditation I, as it were, sang songs. And that music voiced itself even in my prayers and psalmody, and by reason of the interior sweetness which was outpoured upon me, I was impelled to sing what before I had only said, not publicly forsooth, for I did it only before God the Creator. Richard Rolle, The Fire of Love and the Mending of Life, or the Rule of Living, Woodbridge, Boydell and Brewer, 1996, page 38. Other Christian mystics have also alluded to a divine sound or melody. Jacob Boehme, 1575–1624, in his text, The Aurora, London, John Watkins, 1914, writes, "If you should in this world bring many thousand sorts of musical instruments together, and all should be tuned in the best manner, most artificially, and the most skilful masters of music should play on them in concert together, all would be no more than the holdings and barkings of dogs, in comparison with the divine music, which riseth up through the divine sound and tunes from eternity to eternity." The late D. Scott Rogo, 1950–1990, who wrote 2 books on paranormal music experiences. For more on this, see D. Scott Rogo, NAD, A Study of Some Unusual Otherworld Experiences, New York, University Books, 1970, and A Psychic Study of the Music of the Spheres, NAD, Volume 2, New York, University Books, 1972, makes the argument that hearing mystical sounds is a transcultural phenomenon and not merely relegated to those of a religious bent. To back up this assertion, Rogo, 1970, provides 5 categories in which individuals report hearing inner melodies, 4 of which have a bearing here. 1. Persons who hear sounds in normal states. 2. Those undergoing a near-death experience who hear music and, on occasion, those who attend to them. 3. People who have out-of-body experiences or who practice astral travel. 4. Mystics who report hearing an inner music. In India, the sound current practice has a long history and appears to date back to before the pre-Vedic period. Mircea Eliade in Yoga, Immortality and Freedom, Princeton University Press, 1970, pp. 390–391, provides suggestive notes on mystical sounds and quotes the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad and several other Buddhist and Hindu scriptures of antiquity which describe the internal hearing of a bell sound. He also refers the Dabistan-e-Mazaheb, wherein the author speaks of meditation on absolute sound. Although each religion gives a different description of the practice, and each have varying interpretations of what listening to the inner sound ultimately means. In Indian religious systems, 2 terms have become predominant: Nada Yoga and Shabd Yoga. Both terms are more or less interchangeable, though Nada Yoga as a descriptive marker appears more frequently before the 19th and 20th century. For example, almost all Radhasoami-related movements use the word Shabd and seldom use the word Nad. For more on the usage of the term Shabd in Radhasoami, see Mark Juergensmeyer's Radhasoami Reality, The Logic of a Modern Faith, Princeton University Press, 1991. As for the etymology of the terms, Shabd is a Sanskrit term meaning sound speech, often used in different contexts to mean eternal and undivided. Nad or nada is also a Sanskrit word meaning sound, usually in terms of something sacred or transcendent. Early figurines discovered in Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa in the Indus Valley, which date back to before the Vedas, suggestively indicate that some form of yoga was practiced. Jan Wydiański has given an elaborate argument in his article, The Indus Valley Origin of a Yoga Practice, 1987, that the practice of withdrawing one's consciousness from the body has a long precedence and can be dated to long before the Vedas were finalized. As Diansky explains, Mahadevan comes to the conclusion that the Soma rituals of the Indo-Iranian religions were based on the pre-Aryan Harappan substratum, and that this is the reason for the remarkable resemblances between the Harappan symbolism of a sacred filter, the peculiar stand in front of animals on many seals, and the Soma ritual as described in the Rig Veda. Although the Indus Valley civilization still holds many secrets, the evidence shows that some of its traditions survived and are still alive today. The system of yoga, which originated in the Indus Valley, has existed for more than 5,000 years and is now moving from being an Indian tradition to becoming the common property of all humanity. Jan Wydiański, The Indus Valley Origin of a Yoga Practice. Artibus Asiae, Volume 48, Number 1/2, 1987, pages 89 to 108, Jastor, available online. In the book, Listening to the Inner Sound Current, the perennial practice of Shabd Yoga, we pointed to the ubiquity of sound current practices found throughout the world, arguing that it is reasonable to assume that the interior exploration of one's own consciousness, by hearing subtle sounds and contemplating inner light, is not merely a cultural artifact restricted only to certain geographical regions, but is rather a biological inherency which can be potentially accessed by anyone, anywhere and anytime. In short, Shabd or Nad Yoga elicits a structural pathway within one's own neuroanatomies. Yet, it is nevertheless evident that the evolution of this practice has cultural and historical variants that have developed over time. India's spiritual systems, in particular, have defined and refined the technique and have given the most exhaustive treatment of the subject in the world. Andrea Diem Lane and David Christopher Lane, Listening to the Inner Sound, the Perennial Practice of Shabd Yoga, Walnut, Mount San Antonio College, 2018, pages 6-7. Since listening to the inner sound to elevate one's consciousness is a structural option within human beings, and that it most likely has a naturalistic origination, the question we wish to explore in the following sections is how the practice manifested over time in differing geographical regions. What we discovered in researching this from a historical and sociological perspective is that the modus operandi of concentrating on inner sounds seems to be invariably intertwined to the theology of the local region. In other words, Christianity's understanding of Shabd Yoga, a term we will use loosely to mean simply any form of meditation that listens to the inner sound for concentration, is invariably explained in light of the Bible, whereas Sikhism's understanding is explained in light of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib. The universal aspect of sound meditation, in other words, is relativized by the historical time and context in which it is practiced. These ideas were also presented at the Dalebag Educational Institute in August of 2018, when Andrea Diem Lane and I were asked to be plenary speakers for an international conference honouring the 200th birth anniversary of Shiv Dayal Singh, the founder of Radhasoami. See the PDF flyer available online. Today there are a number of new religious movements which have made listening to the inner sound current a cornerstone of their teachings. These groups include the Radhaswamis. The term Radhaswami has several alternative spellings depending on the particular satsang branch. For instance, the Agra groups such as Dayalbag, Swami Bag and Pipal Mandi prefer to spell the word conjoined and with an O instead of the phonetic W, whereas the Bayas satsang prefers to spell it as Radhaswami with a space between both words with a capital S. The other popular variant that others groups, such as Manavtar Mandir, employ is Radhaswami, foregoing the O and replacing with a W. For more on this small but still controversial issue, see the work of Santas Maheshwari, particularly correspondence with certain Americans, Swami Bag, Agra, Radhaswami Satsang, 1960 to 1985, and their various branches. The Divine Light Mission, Eckankar, MSIA, Master Path, Sawan Kirpal Mission, Kuan Yin Ching Hai, Self-Realization Fellowship, Manavta Mandir, 3HO, and even Theosophy, among others. In this study, we will provide a historical and comprehensive overview of these movements and how they have incorporated listening to the inner sound as part of their spiritual discipline. We are particularly interested in the distinctive and nuanced ways that each group teaches how to listen to the inner sound current, and how in turn they interpret such in their own unique theologies. However, before we commence in detailing the popularity of Shabd Yoga across a number of new religious movements, it is important to properly understand the historical roots of the practice, particularly as it was developed in India and Persia. Genealogically speaking, almost every new religious movement across the globe that emphasizes listening to the sound current as part of their meditational discipline has roots in the Sufi, Sant and Radhaswami traditions of North India. Why this is so is of special interest, since it underlines how religious ideas can spread mimetically across cultural barriers and in the process become adapted to new geographical locations and audiences. For example, Eckankar's founder, Paul Twitchell, who started his group in San Diego, California, was a former initiate of Kirpal Singh, whose center of operation, Ruhani Satsang, was in Delhi, India. Although there are definite similarities between both groups, Twitchell modified Shabd Yoga teaching so as to appeal to a more westernized clientele. David Christopher Lane, Gakko Came from Venus, Exploring the Lost History of Eckankar, Walnut, Mount San Antonio College, 2020. It is important to document how a core idea such as listening to the inner sound becomes theologically refashioned when it is subsumed by a new religious movement that wishes to genealogically dissociate itself from its predecessors. In a paper, The New Panths, Shabdism in North America, first presented to the American Academy of Religion's Western Region Conference at Stanford University on March 26, 1982, I used the term genealogical dissociation to describe any religious movement which attempts to deny or hide its previous association with a particular religion or spiritual leader. The reasons for this can be manifold, but at the Stanford conference I argued that it is primarily because of this emphasis on becoming established as a separate entity that the given group and its founder disconnect instead of integrate the past out of which they arose. Most likely this is because there is an underlying fear that if such a past connection is made, the new religion will attract less followers. Although the essential principle of Shabd Yoga, hear inner subtle sounds to concentrate the mind, may not dramatically change, how one views its purpose and efficacy is open to a variety of fluctuations related to time and place. In the following section, details about the relevant neurobiological basis underlying such a discipline will also be explored since it clearly indicates the transcultural nature of the practice. We will then focus on how the confluence of Sufism, Sant Mat, Yoga, Tantrism, and later Sikhism led to a modern-day articulation of Shabd Yoga and the efficacy of listening to the inner sound current as an elemental spiritual technique. From this eclectic assemblage, our study will then look at a cluster of new religious movements, from various Radhasoami branches to Theosophy, to Self-Realization Fellowship, to Eckankar, to MSIA, to 3HO, to Masterpath, to Kuan Yin, etc., which have made listening to the sound current a central teaching in their respective traditions. The goal here is to present a clear and comprehensive historical guidebook to groups which share a genealogical connection, association, and a specific yogic technique. In the conclusion, we want to explore how Shabd Yoga-related ideas may take on still newer forms and newer ways of expression in the future, especially in light of how technologies such as virtual and augmented reality are being employed. The neurobiological basis of Shabd Yoga. This section is partially based on earlier presentations that Andrea Diem and I gave at 3 conferences, 2010, 2014, 2018, at the Dayalbagh Educational Institute in Agra, India. See the following publications for a more in-depth analysis: Spiritual Consciousness, edited by P. Sriramamurthy, Prem Prashant, Anand Mohan, New Delhi, New Age Books 2013, pages 53-70, David Christopher Lane, The Oceanic Metaphor, Walnut, Mount San Antonio College 2014, Andrea Diem Lane, The Cerebral Mirage, Walnut, Mount San Antonio College 2014, and Listening to the Inner Sound Current, Diem Lane, 2018. Although it is not possible to pinpoint exactly when NAD or Shabd Yoga first emerged as a distinctive spiritual discipline in India and elsewhere, the fact remains that such a possibility is a biological inherency in human beings. Thus, it is not surprising that such a practice would eventually emerge amongst spiritual aspirants, and that various iterations of how to perform the exercise are found throughout many of the world's major religions. The human brain is the most sophisticated operating system known to exist. It has roughly 86 billion neurons and trillions of synaptic connections via a vast labyrinth of axons, dendrites, and other subtle clefts. Although it weighs only 3 or so pounds, within its enfolded compound resides the most remarkable feature in the known universe, consciousness. For more on this, see The Neural Basis of Consciousness, an interview with Professor Patricia Churchland, conducted by Meredith Duran, Walnut, Mount San Antonio College, 2019. Consciousness is the supreme mystery that enlivens all that we know about the world around us. While most of the time our awareness is projected outwardly in order to help us better survive and adapt in this evolutionary experiment writ large, there are those mystical pioneers who have turned inwards to discover where this very consciousness arises from and explore what possibilities it portends. Humans have developed a variety of tools to alter their awareness and make it possible to venture into hitherto uncharted territories of the mind. One of the most ancient techniques that have become increasingly popular over time, particularly in the modern era, is a meditational practice centered on listening to subtler and subtler inner sounds. It is most well known today as Shabd or Nad Yoga. It is intriguing to speculate about how listening to inner sounds first originated among early humankind, long before it became codified as a practice. There are several hypotheses that offer tantalizing suggestions, including early near-death experiences, sleep paralysis, extended periods of sensory deprivation, chemical alteration, and more. In near-death experiences, NDEs, for instance, a significant number of patients reported hearing a beautiful melody. I heard what seemed like millions of little golden bells ringing, tinkling. They rang and rang. Many times since, I've heard those bells in the middle of the night. Next, I heard humming. Music surrounded me. It came from all directions. Its harmonic beauty, unlike earthly vocal or instrumental sounds, was totally undistorted. It flowed unobtrusively like a glassy river, quietly worshipful, excitingly edifying, and totally comforting. It provided a reassuring type of comfort, much like a protective blanket that whispered peace and love. I had never sensed anything like it. Perhaps angelic would describe it. And then I heard the music. It was a tone so sublimely perfect that remembering it still brings me to tears. I knew then, and know now, that I was hearing the symphony of angels, the song of the universe, what some have called the music of the spheres. All thoughts melted in its melody, and everything else ceased to be of any importance. Christine Spencer, Pathways to Peace, Understanding Death and Embracing Life. Bloomington, Balboa Press, 2011. Sleep paralysis is often accompanied by a severe feeling of immobility, a numbness, where one feels as if frozen. According to a 2011 meta-analysis, Prevalence of Sleep Paralysis, a systematic review, Brian A. Sharpless, Jacques P. Barber, Lifetime Prevalence Rates of Sleep Paralysis, a systematic review, Sleep Medical Review, October, 15.5, 311 to 315. Sharpless and Barber combined more than 30 studies on sleep paralysis prevalence from a variety of cultures and groups, giving them a sample size of over 36,000. They concluded that approximately 8% of people experience sleep paralysis, rising to around 28% in high-risk groups, those that have a disrupted sleep pattern, and up to 34% in those suffering from psychiatric disorders such as anxiety and depression. While at first glance, one may wonder what sleep paralysis has to do with meditation or yoga, a close analysis shows that it may well have been a triggering point among early humans for a deeper psychic exploration. This is precisely because sleep paralysis is often accompanied by extremely vivid visions that are usually taken as real and not merely dreamy hallucinations. In some sense, every night we sleep, we will undergo varying degrees of sleep paralysis, since it serves as a biochemical way to inhibit our bodily movements while dreaming. As Patricia L. Brooks and John H. Peaver explain in their study Identification of the Transmitter and Receptor Mechanisms, responsible for REM sleep paralysis, Journal of Neuroscience, August 18, 2012, 3229, 9785 to 9795. Understanding the mechanisms mediating REM sleep paralysis is clinically important because they could explain the nature of REM sleep disorders such as RBD, sleep paralysis, and cataplexy/narcolepsy. RBD results from loss of typical REM atonia, which allows pathological motor activation and dream enactment, which often lead to serious injuries. Mahawald and Schenk, 2005. Peaver, 2011. Conversely, sleep paralysis and cataplexy result when REM atonia intrudes into wakefulness, thus preventing normal behavior and movement. Siegel, 2006. Peaver, 2011. Determining the mechanistic nature of REM sleep paralysis will improve our understanding and treatment of such disorders. There is an intriguing parallel here to Shabd yoga meditation, since one of the very first signs that the technique is working is a growing numbness and blissful sensation in the lower extremities of the body. This feeling of immobility eventually takes over the body, and the meditator begins to have vivid inner experiences. Jagat Singh, 1884 to 1951, the third guru proper in the Bayas lineage, has argued that the feeling of paralysis in the body during Shabd yoga meditation is an indication of inner progress. As he explained in a series of letters to his disciples, the numbness of the lower limbs and a feeling of lightness throughout the body are signs of concentration. The numbness of the body is the natural result of concentration and drawing up of consciousness, and you should count yourself fortunate in achieving such satisfactory progress within a very short time. The upward pull also is a mark of quick concentration, and when it is complete, you will see the light within, and the sound also will become clearer and finer. The gradually increasing numbness of the body is the acid test and a proof of the withdrawal of the consciousness, and so far it was very satisfactory. The numbness will be more complete and by practice will also last longer. The numbness of the body is a very good and encouraging sign, especially up to the shoulders. By and by it will be complete. It involves some bodily pain, which should be borne but be gradual and do only as much as can be tolerated easily. Maharaj Sardar Bahadur Jagat Singh Ji, The Science of the Soul, Bay-As, Radhasoami Satsang Bay-As, 1959. Shabd yogis in general, however, have not tried to correlate their inner journeys with a deeper neurobiological understanding, since their practice has been intertwined for centuries with a Gnostic-like theology where the body and the spirit are viewed as distinct entities. However, if Shabd yoga meditation is indeed a neurobiological process, then there should be telltale signs of such that can be quantified by accurately measuring the levels of neurotransmitters such as gamma-aminobutyric acid and glycine in the brain, while one is feeling the sensation of conscious paralysis while meditating. Indeed, one wonders if there are not chemical ways of inducing the same effect in non-meditators and seeing whether or not they report similar experiences as their Shabd yoga counterparts. Sam Harris, a trained neuroscientist and an experienced meditator and occasional partaker of hallucinogenics, suggests that biochemistry plays a role in deep meditation. See his book, Waking Up, A Guide to Spirituality, Without Religion. New York, Simon & Schuster, 2015. One hypothesis is that Shabd yoga practitioners who experience the onslaught of numbness in their extremities, which shouldn't be confused with paresthesia, the sensation that one feels when one's foot goes to sleep, during deep meditation are experiencing a biochemical process that is similar to what happens when we are asleep, and certain neurochemicals manifest to inhibit bodily movements. In other words, Shabd yoga induces a conscious sleep paralysis of sorts. If this is correct, we should be able to ascertain whether or not gamma-aminobutyric acid and glycine levels are operative. Andrea D.M. Lane, David Christopher Lane, The Science of Going Within, Exploring the Neurobiological Basis of Shabd Yoga Meditation. Integral World, April 2013, available online. The brain is a simulator par excellence, and when it is deprived of incoming stimuli, it tends to generate a panoply of fantastic narratives, whether in sleep when we dream or whenever certain psychoactive chemicals, organic or artificial, are ingested. Under these conditions, the senses become aware of hitherto unknown or unexplored properties. The history of mysticism, East and West, is chock full of superluminal reports, where one experiences inner light, sensations of leaving the body, and hearing enchanting music. These remarkable accounts are generally viewed as indicative of higher spiritual attainment, and thus looked upon with favor if they reinforce or legitimize the current thinking of the community. For more on this, see David Christopher Lane, The Virtual Reality of Consciousness, Walnut, Mount San Antonio College, 2019, which explores the theories of Donald Hoffman, Francis Crick, Patricia and Paul Churchland, and Gerald Edelman. However, today, given our more hyper-scientific age, NDES, OBES religious visions are generally regarded as being purely neurological in origin and thus not viewed as paranormal. This is particularly the case with hearing inner sounds, which are often explained away as tinnitus, which the Mayo Clinic defines as the perception of noise or ringing in the ears. A common problem, tinnitus affects about 15 to 20% of people. Tinnitus isn't a condition itself. It's a symptom of an underlying condition, such as age-related hearing loss, ear injury, or a circulatory system disorder. For more on this, see available online. NAD and Shabd Yoga adherents balk at the suggestion that what they are hearing is merely tinnitus misdiagnosed, since they argue that there is a significant difference between the two because Shabd elevates while tinnitus irritates. However, even tinnitus is not yet fully understood by science, and it may well be that there is a wider spectrum to how and why certain sounds generate a feeling of bliss and upliftment, and others do not. The tinnitus label is most likely too general and are more comprehensive. Arguably, a detailed understanding of neuroanatomy in the future may clarify our present confusion surrounding what these inner sounds may portend. The conflation of tinnitus with the inner sound current is a complicated one and needs further research, since even Shabd yoga literature describes sounds which have no mystical import. For example, Sawan Singh, in giving advice to an American disciple, categorically states in Spiritual Gems, Bayas, Radhasoami Satsang, 1965, page 127, that 8 of the sounds are local, but the bell and conch are connected with higher regions. By using the term local, Sawan Singh may be referring to something akin to tinnitus. In any case, sound like light is not singular, but a spectrum of different frequencies, and this important distinction must be considered before reducing all internal sounds to the rushing of blood in the head. Nevertheless, one thing is certain: the meditational practice of Nad and Shabd yoga is given high praise in several Hindu and Sikh scriptures, and it has continually grown more popular over the last 2 centuries, both in India and around the globe. The history of Nad and Shabd yoga. In the early commentaries made upon the Vedas known as the Upanishads, much is made of a primeval sound known as Aum/Om, which is equated with Brahman/God. One of the earliest of such texts that elaborates on the sacred sound is the Chandogya Upanishad, which scholars believe was composed 9 to 6 centuries before the advent of Christianity. The Sanskrit text begins with Prathamodhyaya, Omityet Dakshar Mudgitam Upasit, Omiti Hyudgaiti Tasyopavyakhyanam, which Swami Lokeswarananda translates as, Om is the closest word to Brahman. Recite this Om as if you are worshipping Brahman. How you recite this Om is being explained. Chandogya Upanishad, following Sankara's commentary, Belur Math, Ramakrishna Mission Institute of Culture, 2017. A number of other Upanishads elaborate on the power and efficacy of Om, but the one text that elaborates in detail about listening to the inner sound as a foundational spiritual practice is the Nada Bindu Upanishad, which scholars are still debating about when it was composed, with dates ranging as far back as the 4th century BCE to the 1st century CE. For more discussion on the history and origin of the Nada Bindu Upanishad, refer to Russell Paul, The Yoga of Sound, The Healing Power of Chant and Mantra, Novato, New World Library, 2006. It's this core text that has had a major influence on other yogic manuals, particularly about how to listen to the inner sound and which sounds in hierarchical order one should attend to. A key excerpt from the Nada Bindu Upanishad explains the yoga of sound in its essence. The yogin, being in the Siddhasana, posture, and practicing the Vaishnavi mudra, should always hear the internal sound through the right ear. In the beginning of his practice, he hears many loud sounds. They gradually increase in pitch and are heard more and more subtly. At first, the sounds are like those proceeding from the ocean, clouds, kettle drum, and cataracts. In the middle stage, those proceeding from mardala, a musical instrument, bell, and horn. At the last stage, those proceeding from tinkling bells, flute, veena, a musical instrument, and bees. Thus he hears many such sounds more and more subtle. When he comes to that stage when the sound of the great kettle drum is being heard, he should try to distinguish only sounds more and more subtle. Just as the bee drinking the honey, alone, does not care for the odor, so the chitta, which is always absorbed in sound, does not long for sensual objects, as it is bound by the sweet smell of nada and has abandoned its flitting nature. The serpent Chitta, through listening to the nada, is entirely absorbed in it, and becoming unconscious of everything concentrates itself on the sound. The sound serves the purpose of a sharp goad to control the maddened elephant, Chitta, which roves in the pleasure garden of the sensual objects. It serves the purpose of a snare for binding the deer, Chitta. It also serves the purpose of a shore to the ocean waves of Chitta. When the spiritual sight becomes fixed without any object to be seen, when the Vayu, prana, becomes still without any effort, and when the chitta becomes firm without any support, he becomes of the form of the internal sound of Brahma Pranava. K. Narayanasvami Iyer, 30 Minor Upanishads, Madras, Madras Publishing, 1914, Nada Bindu Upanishad. The literary structure of the Nada Bindu Upanishad has become a template for other later iterations of Nad Yoga, which almost invariably follow the guidelines laid out 2 millennia ago. First, the practitioner is advised to always hear the internal sound through the right ear. Later, Shabd yoga groups in the Sant and Radhasoami traditions will make this a cardinal feature in their initiation instructions. Why this emphasis on the right ear is open to speculation, with many confluent theories abounding. These range from 1. Simple sanitation, as the left hand was often used when answering the call of nature in pre-modern societies, Sun's toilet paper. For a cursory history of toilet hygiene, D.M. Davison, Wipe, A Brief History of Toilet Hygiene, Hillsborough River Press, 2020. 2. The predominance of right-handedness in the human population, 90% versus 10% of left-handed orientation. 3. The symbolic mythological elevation of the right hand as being superior. 4. And arguably the pre-scientific intuition that the right ear receives and retrieves sounds better than the left ear. As the Acoustical Society of America reported in 2007, as summarized by Science Daily, listening requires sensitive hearing and the ability to process information into cohesive meaning. Add everyday background noise and constant interruptions, and the ability to comprehend what is heard becomes that much more difficult. Audiology researchers have found that in such demanding environments, both children and adults depend more on their right ear for processing and retaining what they hear. Science Daily, TTPS, available online. Yogis in the Nad and Shabd yoga tradition have tended to provide a dramatic and mythological explanation behind why the right ear is preferred to the left ear, since the former is of the positive power, Sat Purush, and the latter is part and parcel of the negative power, Kal. Sawan Singh, Spiritual Gems, Bayas, Radhasoami Satsang Bayas, 1965. In letter number 27 to an American disciple, Sawan Singh writes, "In case the strength of the Shabd in the left ear persists, you should relax your concentration and bring your mind out in order to subdue the left ear Shabd, which is to be eschewed as being the sound of the negative power, while we have to follow that of the positive power, which is either from the right side or in the middle." Yet even this bipolarity is often minimized, since Nad and Shabd yogis argue that the inner sound current eventually comes from the center of the forehead and above. A number of Upanishads elucidate on Om, Shabd, and how the primordial sound is generative of the creation. For example, the Mandukya Upanishad, though complied several centuries later than the Nadabindu Upanishad, elaborates on the significance of Om in just 12 verses. Swami Krishnananda provides the following English translation of the ancient Sanskrit text. We have cited only the pertinent passages here. 1. Om. This imperishable word is the whole of this visible universe. Its explanation is as follows: what has become, what is becoming, what will become, verily all of this is Om. And what is beyond these three states of the world of time, that too, verily, is Om. 8. This identical Atman, or self, in the realm of sound, is the syllable Om. The above described 4 quarters of the self, being identical with the components of the syllable, and the components of the syllable being identical with the 4 quarters of the self. The components of the syllable are A, U, M, 9. Vaishvanara, whose field is the waking state, is the first sound, A, because this encompasses all and because it is the first. He who knows thus encompasses all desirable objects, he becomes the first. 10. Taijasa, whose field is the dream state, is the second sound, U, because this is an excellence, and contains the qualities of the other 2. He who knows thus exalts the flow of knowledge and becomes equalized. In his family there will be born no one ignorant of Brahman. 11. Prajna, whose field is deep sleep, is the third sound, M, because this is the measure, and that into which all enters. He who knows thus measures all and becomes all. 12. The fourth is soundless, unutterable, a quieting down of all relative manifestations, blissful, peaceful, non-dual. Thus, Om is the Atman verily. He who knows thus merges his self in the self. Yea, he who knows thus. Swam Krishnananda, the Mandukya Upanishad, Rishikesh, India, Sivananda Ashram ebook, available online. While these Upanishads serve as the seeding ground for Nad and Shabd yoga, later, medieval texts offer more technical and specific guidelines for hearing subtle inner sounds during meditation. The Hatha Yoga Pradipika elaborates on the practice and what the aspirant will achieve if they attain to the highest degree of perfection in the discipline. The following is excerpted from Pancham Sin's translation. 1. The happiness which increases in the hearts of Yogiswaras, who have gained success in samadhi by means of attention to the nada, is beyond description, and is known to Sri Gurunatha alone. 2. The sound which a muni hears by closing his ears with his fingers should be heard attentively till the mind becomes steady in it. 3. By practicing with this nada, all other external sounds are stopped. The yogi becomes happy by overcoming all distractions within 15 days. 4. In the beginning, the sounds heard are of great variety and very loud, but as the practice increases, they become more and more subtle. 5. In the first stage, the sounds are surging, thundering like the beating of kettle drums and jingling ones. In the intermediate stage, they are like those produced by conch, mridanga, bells, etc. 6. In the last stage, the sounds resemble those from tinklets, flute, veena, bee, and so on. These various kinds of sounds are heard as being produced in the body. 7. Though hearing loud sounds like those of thunder, kettle drums, etc., one should practice with the subtle sounds also. 8. Leaving the loudest, taking up the subtle one, and leaving the subtle one, taking up the loudest, thus practicing, the distracted mind does not wander elsewhere. 9. Wherever the mind attaches itself first, it becomes steady there, and then it becomes absorbed in it. Hatha Yoga Pradipika, translated by Pancham Sin, Allahabad Panini Office, 1914. The ultimate goal of listening to the sound current was to achieve moksha or liberation. Because of its very simple technique, close the ears and listen attentively, this yoga became widely known and adopted by various religious subsects in Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sufism, and Sikhism. The writings attributed to Gorakhnath and Nathism repeatedly mention Shabd and its efficacy, since the word Shabda is the guru, and attention, Surat or Surta, is the disciple. In a similar vein, the following lines point to efficacy of the sound current. In the realization of the word Shabda Pachai, the mind remains in equipoise. The word Shabda is the one, Omkar, light Jyoti is the self. The void, Sun Surat, is the mother, and consciousness, Chit or Chaitan, is the father. Steadiness, Nishchai, without anxiety, causes the river to flow in the mind. The wordless, Nishabda, is the key, and the word Shabda is the lock. The unconscious one, Ashe, is old. The conscious one is young. Mind in self-transcendence, Unman, is ever aware, Chetan. For more on this, refer to available online. The Garanda Samhita of the 17th century is a detailed yoga manual and has had a distinctive influence on other yogic-related movements, including Advait Mat and Prem Rawat's Divine Light Mission. It too goes into detail about which sounds one should hear while meditating. 78. At past midnight, in a place where there are no sounds of any animals, etc., to be heard, let the yogi practice Puraka and Kumbhaka, closing the ears by the hands. 79 to 80. He will hear then various internal sounds in his right ear. The first sound will be like that of crickets, then that of a beetle, then that of bells, then those of gongs of bell metal, trumpets, kettle drums, mridanga, military drums and dundubi, etc. 81 to 82. The various sounds are cognized by daily practice of this kumbhaka. Last of all is heard the anahata sound rising from the heart. Of this sound there is resonance. In that resonance there is a light. In that light the mind should be immersed. When the mind is absorbed, then it reaches the highest seat of Vishnu, Paramapada. By success in this Brahmari Kumbhaka, one gets success in Samadhi. The Garanda Samhita, translated by James Mallinson, Woodstock, yogavidya.com, 2004. The Sufi emphasis on the sound current. Listening to the sound current, given its biological roots, also became popularized in Sufi-oriented Islam as an efficacious spiritual practice. Hazrat Inayat Khan, 1882 to 1927, writing in the early 20th century, published an entire treatise on the subject entitled The Mysticism of Sound and Music. In the chapter on abstract sound, Khan provides a more universal explanation of the sound current. Abstract sound is called Sauti Sarmad by the Sufis. All space is filled with it. The vibrations of this sound are too fine to be either audible or visible to the material ears or eyes, since it is even difficult for the eyes to see the form and color of the ethereal vibrations on the external plane. It was the Sauti Sarmad, the sound of the abstract plane, which Muhammad heard in the cave of Gari Hira when he became lost in his divine ideal. The Quran refers to this sound in the words, "Be, and all became." Moses heard this very sound on Mount Sinai when in communion with God, and the same word was audible to Christ when absorbed in his heavenly Father in the wilderness. Shiva heard the same Anahad Nada during his samadhi in the cave of the Himalayas. The flute of Krishna is symbolic of the same sound. This sound is the source of all revelation to the masters, to whom it is revealed from within. It is because of this that they know and teach one and the same truth. Hazrat Inayat Khan, The Mysticism of Sound and Music, the Sufi teaching of Hazrat Inayat Khan, Boston and London, Shambhala, 1996. The Chishtiya order of the Sufis, which has a long history tracing back to Ibrahim ibn Adam of the 8th century, came to India in the 12th century due to the pioneering work and teachings of Khwaja Muhin ad-Din Chishti. For more on the history of this tradition, see C. Ernst and B. Lawrence, Sufi Martyrs of Love, The Chishti Order in South Asia and Beyond, London, Palgrave Macmillan, 2002. The mystics in this tradition focused on trying to achieve unity with God through a series of meditational practices, which included repeating divine names and listening to sacred tones. Famous mystics in this lineage include Baba Sheikh Farid, Amir Khusrau, Salim Chishti, and Inayat Khan. Baba Sheikh Farid would have an outsized influence beyond Sufi-oriented Islam when Guru Nanak, the founder of Sikhism, praised and preserved parts of Farid's poetry. Later, Guru Arjan, the fifth Sikh spiritual leader, incorporated more than 120 of Baba Sheikh Farid's poems in their holy book Adi Granth, which was later expanded by Guru Gobind Singh into what is now famously known as the Sri Guru Granth Sahib. In the 17th century, Sufi mystics Sarmad, Mian Mir, and Mullah Shah praised listening to the inner sound as one of the supreme practices to achieve God union. In fact, Mullah Shah described the technique as Sultan ul Azkar. Claude Field, Mullah Shah, The Sufi Mystic, Walnut, Mount San Antonio College, 2020. One of the more interesting works on this subject comes from the pen of Dara Shikoh, the eldest son of Shah Jahan, the great Mughal emperor who built the wondrous Taj Mahal in Agra, India. After securing initiation from his spiritual guide, Mullah Shah Badeksi in Kashmir, Dara Shikoh wrote a short but revealing text in Persian entitled Risala-i Haq Numan, The Compass of Truth. Here he openly revealed what had usually been a closely guarded secret among Sufi masters: how to properly use breathing exercises, holy repetition, focused awareness, and listening to the sound current in order to free the petty mind from unnecessary distractions and experience a majestic unity with the divine. Dara Shikoh, Compass of Truth, The Esoteric Practice of Sultan ul Azkar, translated by Rai Bahadur Srisa Chandra Vasu, Walnut, Mount San Antonio College, 2020. Dara Shikoh was by all accounts a remarkable scholar, even if he lacked the military prowess necessary to succeed his father, Shah Jahan, as Mughal emperor. He was fluent in several languages and had a keen interest in spirituality across traditions, forgoing the strident parochialism and narrow-mindedness of more literally minded followers of Islam. Historically, the tragedy that still haunts India till this day is that Dara Shikoh was never able to succeed his father as heir apparent, since his younger brother Aurangzeb ordered his execution and beheading so that he could succeed to the throne, which he did in 1658, declaring that his older brother Dara Shikoh was as an apostate. Nevertheless, Dara Shikoh has had an outsized influence because of his remarkable writings and for the tolerance he showed to religious expressions differing from his own. For more in-depth look at the Mughal Empire and the various succession intrigues, see Avik Chandra, Dara Shikoh, The Man Who Would Be King, New Delhi, HarperCollins 2019. What is most remarkable about the Compass of Truth is how open and transparent Dara Shikoh was in providing the modus operandi of an erstwhile secret Sufi meditational practice. His elucidation of how to listen to the inner sound and why it is more efficacious than other techniques can be best summarized by one very telling and observant line, which Professor Kugel translates thusly: There is no practice better than that of hearing this sound. This is because every other practice depends upon the will of the practitioner. If for a moment stops it, the practice ceases, but not so this practice. It does not depend upon the will of the practitioner. It is present and available without ceasing and without interruption at all times. Scott Kugel, editor, et al., Sufi, Meditation and Contemplation, Timeless Wisdom from Mughal India, New York, Omega Publications, 2012. As Darashiko elaborates about the sound current practice, O friend, when thou sittest to practice this retention of breath, it is necessary that thou shouldst fix thy attention on thy heart, because in this practice sounds will be heard coming from within thee. With regard to these sounds, Mullah Rum of the Blessed Memory has thus written, On his lips there is a lock, but heart is full of secrets. His lips are silent, but his heart is full of sounds. This sound is sometimes like the sound of a boiling big cauldron, and sometimes like the buzzing heard in the nest of bees and wasps. It is this internal sound that one of the ancient authors has thus alluded. Behold his words, they seem like the sounds of ants when he utters his speech in our ears. The whole universe is illumined with the sunshine of his presence. ... O friend, do not imagine that this sound is within thee, and therefore a hallucination of thy senses. The whole universe, inside and outside, is full of this sound. It is the great voice of the silence. The practice of hearing the voice of the silence is called in the path of the fakirs, the Sultanul Askar, or the king of all practices. The third kind is the sound which is boundless and infinite, and which is self-existent from eternity, and not caused by anything. This sound has one unchanging pitch and tone, neither increases nor decreases, and in which no modification can ever find its way, and which is without cause. This sound existed from before the creation of the worlds, and exists even now, and will continue to exist even when the worlds enter into non-existence. This sound is called the infinite and absolute sound. There is no practice higher than that of hearing this sound, because every other practice depends upon the will of the practitioner, and if he for a moment ceases to practice it, it comes to a total cessation. But not so this practice, which does not depend upon the will of the practitioner, for this sound exists as an eternal current, unbroken and unceasing, and can be so caught by everybody at all times. Darashiko, Compass of Truth, the esoteric practice of Sultan ul Azkar, translated by Rai Bahadur Srisachandra Vasu, Walnut, Mount San Antonio College, 2020, pages 16 to 20. The Sant and Sikh practice of Shabd and Nam. It is of historical interest to ponder how various religious traditions intersected, from the yogis to the Naths to the Sufis, to the Sants to the Sikhs, and how they each in their own distinctive way emphasized listening to the inner sound. While it is apparent that the Sufi practice of Sultan ul Azkar dates back centuries, with some Muslims claiming that the founder of Islam was conversant with the practice, there is also ample evidence that Shabd and Nad Yoga was one of the key practices employed by Naguna Bhakti poets in the Sant tradition and later by the Sikh gurus in North India. For more on this, see P.D. Bathwell, Traditions of Indian Mysticism based upon Naguna School of Hindi Poetry, Delhi, Heritage Press, 1978. Kabir, for instance, perhaps the most well-known and celebrated Sant, speaks at length about meditating on the inner sound. Remember the Lord, the inner knower, the searcher of hearts. You shall attain the gate of liberation while yet alive. You shall come to know the Shabd, the word of the fearless Lord, and the essence of your own inner being. Day and night, the celestial bugles vibrate the unstruck melody. Then one beholds the Father of the three worlds. There the unstruck music is sounded. It is the music of the love of the three worlds. There millions of lamps of sun and of moon are burning. There the drum beats, and the lover swings in play. There love songs resound, and light rains in showers, and the worshipper is entranced in the taste of the heavenly nectar. Rabindranath Tagore Kabir, a poetic glimpse of his life and work. Walnut, Mount San Antonio College, 2016. And Kabir, selected poems from Sri Guru Granth Sahib, edited by David Christopher Lane, Walnut, Mount San Antonio College, 2019. The Sikh holy scriptures, Sri Guru Granth Sahib, are full of references from various Sants Bhagats, including Ravidas, Farid, Surdas, and Jaidev. Although the teachings of these mystics vary in parts, there are common themes around bhakti, high moral living, and meditating on the inner sound. Guru Nanak, the founder of Sikhism, and his 9 successors laid great stress on Naam and Shabd. The Panch Shabd, the 5 primal sounds, resonate and resound within. The insignia of the Shabd is revealed there, vibrating gloriously. Worlds and realms, nether regions, solar systems and galaxies are wondrously revealed. The strings and the harps vibrate and resound. The true throne of the Lord is there. Nanak is the slave of that one who seeks the Shabad and finds this home within. 5 sounds make the perfect harmony, and the limitless song brings in wondrous intoxication. The Sri Guru Granth Sahib in the original Gurmukhi, and with English and Devanagari translations, is searchable online at Available Online. The contentious issue that is still debated amongst Sikhs and those reading their holy scriptures is how best to interpret what Shabd means, and does listening to 5 inner sounds really capture the essence of Nanak's and Arjan's religious insights. This controversy over hermeneutics is not unique to Sikhism, since the same question arises in Hindu, Buddhist, Christian, and Muslim circles. While those who are inclined to view spiritual practice as an internal quest, not necessarily conforming to orthodox theologies, tend to see references to sound and light as having a mystical and experiential import, whereas those who opt for more literalistic and communal explanations discount such personal revelations, sometimes accusing those of a mystical orientation of being heretical in their views and practices. Peter Berger, in The Heretical Imperative, Contemporary Possibilities of Religious Affirmation, Norwell, Anchor Press, 1979. We have seen this type of conflict in Christianity over the issue of glossolalia, where some have argued that genuine speaking in tongues only occurred among the apostles 2 millennia ago, and that modern manifestations of the phenomenon, as it occurs amongst Pentecostals, is merely imitative or due to emotional hysteria. Felicitas D. Goodman, Speaking in Tongues, A Cross-Cultural Study of Glossolalia, Eugene Wipf and Stock, 2008. Much of the tension revolves around questions of authority and who is best equipped or accepted to adjudicate such metaphysical matters. This conflict arises again and again in new religious movements, which in their desire to achieve uniqueness or one-upmanship over their rival counterparts will speak of higher and lower levels of Shabd access and initiation. Peter Berger, 1979, suggests that religion can be viewed from 3 distinct perspectives: deductive, reductive, and inductive. In simple parlance, 1. Believers hold that their respective religion is true by virtue of a revelation that cannot be doubted. 2. Skeptics argue that religion is illusory because it cannot hold up to rational scrutiny. And 3. One must keep an open mind about the truth or falsity of religion, which warrants further unbiased investigation. Berger's schema can also serve as a template by which to view Shabd yoga-related movements, ranging from those who firmly hold that the sound current is divine to those who believe it is purely neurological in origin, tinnitus, to those who are essentially agnostic about its origination and are open to further inquiry. What further complicates these disputations is that there is a strong belief that the Shabd and the spiritual master are one, and that access to the sound current depends upon the conscious transmission, or grace, of one's initiating guru. Without such a formal initiation into the Shabd yoga practice, the neophyte will not have access to the higher frequencies of the sound current, and thus his or her upward ascent will be sidetracked. Kirpal Singh, founder of Ruhani Satsang, in response to a questioner concerning initiation. Initiation by a perfect living master assures an escort in unknown realms by one who is himself a frequent traveller to those regions. He knows the presiding deities or powers of the plains, conducts the spirit step by step, counsels at every turn and twist of the path, cautions against lurking dangers at each place, explaining in detail all that one desires to know. He is a teacher on all levels of existence, a guru on the earth plane, a guru dev, astral radiant form, in the astral worlds, and a sat guru in the purely spiritual regions. When everyone fails in this very life, at one stage or another, his long and strong arm is always there to help us, both when we are here and we quit the earth plane. He pilots the spirit into the beyond and stands by it, even before the judgment seat of God. Available online. It is therefore not surprising that perceived masters of Shabd Yoga are accorded a very high status, and seekers wishing to learn more about the technique invariably must follow certain guidelines in order to receive initiation and learn the secret techniques about the practice. This point comes into sharper focus when we look at modern sound current movements, starting with the Radhasoami tradition, which has had an enormous and clearly outsized influence on new religious movements which advocate listening to the sound current as an essential feature of their teachings. What we will see is how a simple technique gets intricately intertwined with guru politics and theology. The Radhasoami tradition. For more detailed histories of this movement, refer to Mark Juergensmeyer's Radhasoami Reality, Princeton University Press, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London. Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London. Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London. Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London. Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London. Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London. Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London. Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London. Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London. Garland Publishers, 1991. David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London. Garland Publishers, 1990-1992, and Om Prakash Kaushal's The Radhasoami Movement, Jalandhar, ABS Publications, 1998. By the mid-19th century in North India, the Sant tradition had made a significant impact on a number of emerging new religious groups, including the Kabir Panthis, Satnamis, and Sikh-related sects such as the Namdaris and Nirankaris. For more on this, see W. H. MacLeod and Karin Shoma, The Sant Studies in a Devotional Tradition of India, Delhi, Motilal Banarsidass, 1987. One of the more significant movements to have emerged from Santism is the Radhasoami tradition, as founded by Shiv Dayal Singh, 1818 to 1878. His family was closely associated with Sikhism, though not formally part of the Khalsa. They were great admirers of Guru Nanak and his teachings. According to the biography of Swamiji Maharaj, translated by S. D. Maheshwari, Biography of Swamiji Maharaj, Agra Radhasoami Satsang, 1978. Written by his youngest brother Pratap Singh, 2 decades after his death, their parents were devotees of Tulsi Sahib of Hathras, whose teachings were closely aligned with those of Kabir, Nanak, Paltu Sahib, and Darya Sahib. Tulsi Sahib taught Shabd Yoga, and it appears obvious, even if contested in certain orthodox quarters of Radhasoami, that he instructed Shiv Dayal Singh, more popularly known as Swamiji Maharaj, into the technique of listening to the inner sound current. This method was threefold. 1. Repetition of sacred names. 2. Contemplation of the initiating guru or light within. And 3. Listening to inner sounds. There is also reports that one of Tulsi Sahib's successor, Girdhari Das, was regarded as a guru by Shiv Dayal Singh and treated with the respect accorded to a Mahatma. It may well be that Girdhari also helped groom and guide Swamiji Maharaj after Tulsi Sahib's death in 1843, since the founder of Radhasoami did not announce his satsang publicly until 1861, several months after Girdhari's death in July of 1860. James Bean has done extensive research in connecting Shiv Dayal Singh's tutelage under Girdhari Das. See the special issue of Sarkhand, the Journal of Radhasoami Studies, Maharaj Girdhari Sahib, the unknown guru of Radhasoami history. It is remarkable to note that a small spiritual movement founded in the mid-19th century would over time have a worldwide impact on the practice of Shabd Yoga. This has occurred primarily because the Radhasoami tradition has blossomed into a large number of sub-branches throughout India and abroad. These same groups have, in turn, witnessed further splintering, and there has been a surprising contingent of new religious movements, such as Eckankar, Masterpath, MSYA, and Kuan Yin, that, though distancing themselves from a direct lineal connection to Radhasoami, owe a large debt to Shiv Dayal Singh and his successors. Much of this is due to the clarity with which various Radhasoami masters have explained the path of Surat Shabd Yoga. The modernization of Shabd Yoga owes much to Shiv Dayal Singh's core text, Sarbachan, both prose and poetry, 1884, and the numerous writings from his main successor, Rai Salig Ram, particularly Radhasoami Mat Prakash, 1896. Later gurus in both the Agra and Beas branches have published extensively in English, Hindi, Urdu, and Punjabi. Rai Salig Ram was a pivotal figure in the spread of Radhasoami teachings since his publications were the first to be widely distributed and quoted. For more him, C. Raisaligram, A Glimpse of His Life and Work. Edited by David Christopher Lane. Walnut, Mount San Antonio College, 2018. Professor Andrea Diem Lane's book, The Guru in America. This book was based on Diem Lane's doctoral dissertation in religious studies at the University of California, Santa Barbara, 1995, which was later significantly expanded. Offers several explanations for why Swamiji Maharaj's message carried beyond the parochial confines of Agra. Besides the dissemination of his teachings in various publications by later successors, one innovation that was instrumental was allowing initiation by proxy. Swamiji allowed certain designated disciples to give his technical instructions on meditation in outlying areas that they were living in or visiting. Later, after his death, some of spiritual heirs printed the instructions and had them conveyed by post. Diem further argues that the expansion of communicative technologies and their acceptance is elemental for any new religion to have an impact. As she elaborates, the evolution of religion is directly connected to the evolution of communication technologies. To understand the limits of the latter is to also understand the limits of the former's potential for growth. Thus, all histories of religion are to some measure histories of human development, especially as it relates to the transmission of information. That this is obvious is one thing, from speech to written words to printed books to radio to television to worldwide computer networks. But that it is rarely focused on in appraising how new religions develop is quite another thing altogether, and is something which should not be neglected in any history, religious or otherwise. The history of Radhasoami in the United States is a case in point. Why? Because in many ways the growth of Radhasoami in countries outside of India has been hitched, for better or worse, to the advancement of technology. Even within Radhasoami circles this is well known, as evidenced in the introduction to an in-house Bayas Satsang publication entitled Dawn of Light, wherein the author writes that the great advances made in communications have led to the worldwide spread of Shabd Yoga teachings, especially in Europe and North America. At each stage where there has been a technological revolution, there has been in turn an influx of new initiates to the Radhasoami path. To be sure, Radhasoami masters have not necessarily explained away such increased numbers to better telephone networks, but they have been well aware of how the evolution of the communication industry has led to new opportunities to advance the message of Sant Mat. The Guru in America, Walnut, Mount San Antonio College, 2015, page 17. Swamiji's total initiates was just several thousand during his lifetime, but in the century and a half after his death, the number of Radhasoami followers has increased exponentially. Today, the Radhasoami Satsang at Bayas alone claims to have over 5,000 centers throughout India and nearly 100 worldwide, as reported by the official Radhasoami Satsang Bayas website under the subject of Satsang, available online. This is quite remarkable when one realizes that this number doesn't include the other 30 different Radhasoami branches and all of their respective initiates. Although an exact tally is not yet possible, it is generally estimated that there are over 5 to 6 million followers of Radhasoami worldwide. Rough estimates are based on reports from the major Radhasoami-related centers: Bayas, 4 million plus; Agra Satsangs, Dayalbagh, Swamibagh and Pipalmandi, nearly 500,000; Sawankirpal Mission, over 500,000. Adding to this computation are at least 10 different satsang centers, from Tarn Taran to Sirsa, with numbers estimated to be over 1 million. See the new edition of Professor Mark Juergensmeyer's Radhasoami Reality, Delhi, Oxford University Press, forthcoming. Much of this increase is due to the continual splintering off of rival factions within Radhasoami, which allowed for a multiplicity of gurus, each with their own newly formed center, to spread the teachings in new and innovative ways. Moreover, several of these same Shabd Yoga masters began to travel throughout India and eventually abroad to Europe and North America, attracting Westerners who were unfamiliar with the teachings but who were nevertheless attracted to the simplicity and powerfulness of Shabd Yoga. In addition, several books on Radhasoami and listening to the inner sound current became popular and were widely read. Outstanding among these texts, and one title which still sells thousands of copies yearly, is Julian Philip Johnson's The Path of the Masters, which was first published in 1939. Only 200 copies of the first edition of The Path of the Masters, Bayas Sawan Service League, were published in Paris, France, but after World War II, it has gone through 17 editions. Shortly after the author's untimely death at the hands of mountaineer Paul Petzold, 1908 to 1999, was a distinguished mountaineer. He was one of the first Americans to attempt to climb K2, and was working as Dr. Julian P. Johnson's assistant at the Radhasoami Satsang Bayas Center in 1938 to 1939. However, on January 25, 1939, Paul Petzold and Dr. Johnson's wife of 4 years, Elizabeth Bruce, got in a heated argument over, of all things, her cooking. It finally reached a boiling point when Elizabeth threatened Paul with a shotgun and a fight ensued. Dr. Johnson, who was not there at the time, rushed in to see what was happening only to have Paul hit him to the ground, either by a punch or by pushing, the reports are varied, where he suffered a severe head wound and died several hours later on the way to the Amritsar hospital. At the time, Julian, 1867 to 1939, was working on a sequel to his final book entitled More Light on the Path of the Masters. But it remained unfinished. For more on this tragic episode, which has spawned a number of false rumors among various Shabd Yoga-related groups, see David Christopher Lane's The Mystery of Dr. Johnson's Death, A Spiritual Scandal in the Punjab, Walnut, Mount San Antonio College, 2017. This book, along with his other earlier publication, With a Great Master in India, Julian P. Johnson, With a Great Master in India, Bayas Sawan Service League, 1934. Johnson was also the author of 2 other books that were published in India and were both autobiographical, Call of the East, The Autobiography of an American Surgeon, Bayas, Lahore, Sawan Service League, 1936, and The Unquenchable Flame, Bayas, Lahore, 5 Rivers Manufacturing, 1935. Johnson's first book, Life Among the Hindus, St. Louis, C.B. Woodward Company, 1893, was written when he was a Baptist preacher on his first trip to India to spread the gospel of Christianity. Was written in a clear and accessible style and spoke of great masters who had the secrets to unlock the riddle of existence. Both books served as beacons for attracting new followers to Radhasoami. Ironically, they were also widely plagiarized and judicious excerpts were incorporated into the teachings of other new religious movements, such as Dr. Bhagat Singh Thin's study groups and Paul Twitchell's Eckankar. Another book which introduced Shabd Yoga teachings worldwide was Paul Brunton's A Search in Secret India, 1934. Paul Brunton, 1898 to 1981, born Raphael Hurst, was a best-selling author in the 1930s and 1940s, and introduced many readers to a variety of Indian gurus and mystics, including Meher Baba, 1894 to 1969, and Ramana Maharshi, 1879 to 1950, of South India, which contained a whole chapter devoted to the Radhasoami Center at Dayalbagh in Agra. Brunton writes glowing of its then leader, Sahabji Maharaj, Anand Swarup, 1881 to 1937. The Dayalbagh Satsang was established January 20, 1915, by Anand Swarup, known honorifically as Sahabji Maharaj, 1881 to 1937, who was the successor of Kamta P. Sinha, 1871 to 1913, from Ghazipur, and questions whether the inner sound current heard during meditation is not the result of one's own nervous system. The discussion he has with the Dayalbagh master is one that still resonates today, Sahabji. But the basis of them is sound yoga, or listening for the internal sound, as we usually call it. Brunton, the writings I am studying say that sound is the force which called the universe into being. Sahabji. From a material standpoint you understand it correctly, but rather it is that a current of sound was the first activity of the Supreme Being at the beginning of creation. The universe is not the result of blind forces. Now this divine sound is known to our fraternity, and can be phonetically transcribed. It is our belief that sounds bear the impress of their source, of the power which created them. Therefore, when one of our members listens internally and expectantly for the divine sound, with controlled body, mind and will, he will become lifted up towards the bliss and wisdom of the Supreme Being as soon as he hears the divine sound. Brunton. Is it not possible to imagine that the sound of the blood beating through one's arteries is the divine sound. What other sound can one hear internally? Sahabji, we do not mean any material sound, but a spiritual one. The force which appears as sound on our material plane is only a reflection of that subtler force whose workings evolved the universe. Just as your scientists have reduced matter to electricity, so we may trace the force which we hear on the material plane as sound to a higher vibration that escapes our physical ears, because it exists on the spiritual plane. A sound carries the influence of the region whence it emanates, and so, if you concentrate your attention inwardly in a certain way, you may one day hear the mystic words which sounded forth at the first upheaval, in the primeval chaos, and which form the true name of the Creator. The echoes of those words reverberate back into man's spiritual nature. To catch those echoes, by means of our secret yoga practice, and to trace them up to their origin, is literally to be carried up to paradise. The man who faithfully carries out our Radhasoami practices, which are intended to enable him to hear the mystic sound, will forget himself in utter ecstasy when, at last, it impinges itself upon his inner ear. Brunton, your teachings are startlingly novel. Sahabji, to the West but not to India. Kabir taught the sound yoga in Benares as far back as the 15th century. Paul Brunton, A Search in Secret India, Chapter 8, The Garden of the Lord, New York. Samuel Weiser, 1985, pages 226 to 252. Today, it is estimated that there are at least 20 Radhasoami-related movements, each with their own leader and separate organization, which have a significant outreach around the world, particularly in Europe, Australia, Africa, and North and South America. 1. Radhasoami Satsang Beas. The Beas branch of Radhasoami was established by Jaimal Singh, 1839 to 1903, a soldier in the Indian British Army who permanently retired on the banks of the Beas River in 1889, which he chose for his retirement since it was quite secluded and would provide an ideal location for prolonged meditation. For more on the life and work of Jaimal Singh, refer to Kirpal Singh's A Great Saint, Baba Jaimal Singh, His Life and Teaching. His main successor, Sawan Singh, 1858 to 1948, developed a large centre in honour of his guru, and today, under the leadership of Gurinder Singh, 1954-2, it has become the largest Radhasoami group in the world with millions of followers. It now has centres in over 90 countries across the globe. For more on this, refer to the official Radhasoami Satsang Beas website, available online for an authorised and sanctioned history of the Beas Satsang. Refer to Daryai Lal Kapoor's Heaven on Earth, Beas, Radhasoami Satsang, 1994. For a more objective perspective, see Mark Juergensmeyer's Radhasoami Reality, 1991. Like other Radhasoami-related satsangs, they advocate a threefold meditational process. 1. Simran, repetition of 5 names. 2. Dhyan, contemplation on the Guru or the light within. And Bhajan, listening to the inner sound. To have a fuller understanding of Shabd Yoga meditation, as practiced by the Beas branch, see Charan Singh's Die to Live, Beas, Radhasoami Satsang, 1999. The Beas Satsang has published an extensive number of books in over 40 languages, with English being their most popular medium. In the United States alone, they have built 10 large properties for holding satsang. When the Guru makes his semi-annual visits, there can be well over 4,000 people in attendance, though the vast majority of attendees are from an Indian background. For more on this, see to the official Radhasoami Satsang Beas website available online. The early appeal of Radhasoami to Westerners has clearly waned since its peak in the 1980s during Charan Singh's 1916 to 1990 tenure. While the number of Indians seeking initiation at Beas witnessed steady growth, the numbers of Westerners, without an Indian familial connection, has dropped precipitously. Sociologically speaking, this is most likely due to a number of factors, including the continual number of guru scandals, both in India and abroad, the heightened interest in. The Beas Satsang has gone to great lengths to explain that Shabd Yoga is not unique to India and can be found in almost all of the world's religions. In this regard, they have published over 25 titles in their Mysticism in the World series, replete with such titles as Yoga and the Bible, The Mystic Heart of Judaism and Buddhism, Path to Nirvana, Joseph Leeming, Yoga and the Bible, Beas, Radhasoami Satsang, Beas 1971, Miriam Boxer Caravella, The Mystic Heart of Judaism, New Delhi, Science of the Soul Research Center, 2011, and K.N. Upadhyaya, Buddhism, Path to Nirvana, Beas, Radhasoami Satsang Beas, 2010. A group of visiting evangelical Christians to the Dera at Beas interviewed Charan Singh and asked him, "What is this teaching that all the mystics of the world teach?" To which he responded, "Our spiritual journey starts from the eye center upward, so we have to withdraw our consciousness back to the eye center, and after that, you have to travel with that light and sound within. That is why Christ said, 'If your eye is single, your whole body is full of light.' We have to open this eye and see that light. With the help of that light, we have to find our way back to God. Christ said that spiritual worship pleases the Father, and that Spirit, that Holy Ghost, that Word, that Logos that is in every one of us is here at the eye center. Indian mystics have given Indian names, Christ has given his own name, Persian mystics have given their own name, but those who have traveled within on that path, they have the same message to give. They are not bound by any ritual, by any ceremonies. They don't have anything to worship outside of themselves. They only worship him within." The interview with Charan Singh has been republished in The Gnostic Jesus, Esoteric Christianity, edited by David Christopher Lane, Walnut, Mount San Antonio College, 2016. This excerpt is from page 6. Radhaswami's attempt to find the sound current teachings sprinkled throughout all of the world's major religions has inspired splinter groups to emphasize the same. Because of this, the novel idea of Shabd Yoga can be more appealing to those who have never entertained such a concept or technique before. Although it must be acknowledged that devout followers of these very religions don't necessarily agree with Radhaswami's interpretation of their respective holy books or doctrines. This has led to some biblical scholars, such as John Robinson, 1919 to 1983, to take issue with Radhaswami's Gnostic view of the New Testament, particularly refashioning such phrases as, "If your eye be single, your whole body is full of light," to be indicative of the third eye and deep meditation. Thus, Robinson, no doubt with a bit of irony, entitled his 1979 book Truth is Two-Eyed. John Robinson, Truth is Two-Eyed, Philadelphia, Westminster Press, 1979. 2. The Rouhani Satsang Influence. After the death of his guru Sawan Singh, Kirpal Singh, 1894 to 1974, founded Rouhani Satsang in Delhi, India. Although he discarded the name Radhaswami as a descriptive moniker for his group, he completely aligned his movement with his teacher, Sawan Singh, and his predecessors. Indeed, Kirpal Singh argued that he was part of an unbroken lineage of gurus that goes back through Shiv Dayal Singh to the 10 Sikh gurus, starting with Guru Nanak. In the chapter Rediscovering Lost Strands, A Great Saint, Baba Jaimal Singh, His Life and Teachings, Delhi, Rouhani Satsang, 1960, Kirpal Singh suggests that the 10th Sikh guru, Gobind Singh, transferred his mastership to Ratnagar Rao, who in turn passed the mantle to Tulsi Sahib of Hathras. The problem with the theory, however, is that there is no historical evidence that such a Ratnagar Rao ever existed. Moreover, Kirpal Singh's attempt to tie his movement with the Sikhs discounts the core doctrine among Sikhs worldwide that Gobind Singh designated a holy book, Sri Guru Granth Sahib, as the final guru. For more on this controversy, see Neil Tesla's Crisis and Renewal, Seattle, CreateSpace Independent Publishing, 2017, and David Christopher Lane's The Succession Conspiracy, Walnut, Mount San Antonio College, 2017. By doing such, Kirpal was underlining why his ministry is a continuation of the Sant tradition and that his teachings were no different than what the 10 Sikh gurus taught. Kirpal Singh emphasized that when he gave initiation to new disciples, they would have a first-hand experience of light and sound during their meditation sitting. This was a compelling advertisement for his group, and has been mimicked by all of his reputed successors after his death in 1974. It is now a common theme among gurus in Kirpal Singh's lineage that anyone receiving initiation should have a personal experience of light and sound during the ceremony. Kirpal Singh's innovation was not entirely new, since in Partap Singh's biography of Swamiji Maharaj, Agra, Swami Ba, translated by S.D. Maheshwari, page 3, the founder of Radhaswami, he declares that his older brother often used to raise a little the spirit of certain adhikaris, fitted and deserving, at the time of initiation. Thus, they had a foretaste of the bliss of higher regions and developed faith instantly. Also see the film The Kerpel Statistic, which provides a neurobiological and sociological explanation for why potentially anyone can have an inner experience of light and sound, available online. Kirpal Singh conducted 3 tours to North America in 1955, 1963, and 1972, with each new visit witnessing a geometric increase in the number of attendees. Kirpal Singh also published a number of widely read books that introduced the concept of the sound current to thousands worldwide. These texts include Crown of Life, Naam or Word, and The Night is a Jungle. Crown of Life, Delhi, Ruhani Satsang, 1973, Naam or Word, Anaheim, Ruhani Satsang, 1981. The Night is a Jungle, Tilton, Sant Bani Press, 1975. Each provide a wealth of information on the practice of Shabd Yoga in various traditions and were instrumental in spreading the practice of listening to the inner sound current. He eventually initiated over 80,000 disciples during his lifetime. After Kirpal Singh's death on August 21, 1974, there was a severe succession crisis that resulted in a plethora of successors, with each claiming to be the rightful heir. These include Kirpal Singh's eldest son, Darshan Singh, 1921 to 1989, who eventually gathered the largest following and established Sawan Kirpal mission. He was succeeded by his eldest son, Rajinder Singh, 1946 to present, who retained his residence in Chicago, Illinois, and who has made significant strides in making Shabd Yoga more accessible to a westernized audience via his Science of Spirituality, SOS, organization. For more on this, see available online. Thakar Singh, 1929 to 2005, who was appointed by Madam Hardavi, a longtime associate of Kirpal Singh and the chief administrator of Sawan Ashram. He created a center in Umpqua, Oregon, which is now called The Lighthouse, and serves as a meditation retreat. Before Thakar died, he appointed Baljit Singh, 1962, as his successor. He has carried on the ministry under the name Know Thyself as Soul. The organization has over 25 centers scattered throughout the United States and offers initiation in their version of Sant Mat. For more on this, see available online. Ajaib Singh, 1926 to 1997, became known in the West when he was discovered by Aaron Stevens of Vancouver, Canada, and later supported by Russell Perkins, who was well known because of Sant Bani Ashram and Press in Sanbornton, New Hampshire. His following was never very large, numbering several thousand, and those who claimed succession after him, such as Sadhu Ram, 1944 to present, and Ram Singh, 1954 to present, have kept a relatively low profile. For more on this, see the following websites. 1. Ajaib Singh, available online. 2. Sadhu Ram, available online. And 3. Ram Singh, available online. Ram Singh was initiated by Baba Somanath, 1885 to 1976, a disciple of Sawan Singh. Later, he aligned himself with Ajaib Singh, whom he alleges commissioned him to carry on his guru's ministry. Primarily because Kirpal Singh and several of those who followed in his lineage, particularly Rajinder Singh, have not disdained advertising, they have made the practice of listening to the inner sound current much more widely known than in decades past. Unquestionably, Kirpal Singh and the various organizations that have emerged from his teachings are responsible to a large degree for why Shabd Yoga is no longer an obscure topic of discussion amongst spiritual seekers. For more about the succession disputes after the death of Kirpal Singh, refer to David Christopher Lane's The Radhasoami Tradition, New York and London, 1992, particularly chapters 4 and 5. In following the spread of Shabd Yoga teachings on new religious movements in North America and elsewhere, it is necessary to genealogically identify where, when, and how different Indian schools of thought produced such an influence. Thus, in describing the following new religions, we will want to document as much as possible how certain core ideas and practices get adopted and transformed over time. Theosophy. One of the most remarkable aspects about Theosophy, as founded by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, 1831 to 1891, in 1875 in New York City, was that it rekindled a great interest among middle and upper-class Indians for their own traditions, from which many were drifting away from due to the influence of capitalism, Christianity, and modern science. There are several biographies on Madame Blavatsky ranging from the hagiographical, Sylvia Cranston's H.P.B., The Extraordinary Life and Influence of Helena Blavatsky, founder of the modern Theosophical movement, Los Angeles, Tarcher Perigi, 1993, to the pointedly critical Edmund Garrett's Isis Very Much Unveiled, London, Westminster Gazette Office, 1895. For a more two-pronged perspective, see Marion Mead's Madame Blavatsky, The Woman Behind the Myth, New York Open Road Media, 2014. Theosophy also generated tremendous enthusiasm for all things Eastern among Americans and Europeans. Blavatsky wrote prodigiously about fusing occult teachings, drawn from her wide readings in Hinduism and Buddhism, with modern science. Although critics dismissed much of her work as either unreadable or pseudoscientific, her admirers praised her literary skill in bringing esotericism to the masses. One of her most popular books was The Voice of Silence, originally published in 1889. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, The Voice of Silence, Wheaton, Quest Books, 1992, which provides a distillation of sound current teachings. Blavatsky alleges that she translated the text from the Book of Golden Precepts and provides a rather convoluted explanation behind its origin in her preface. The original precepts are engraved on thin oblong squares, copies very often on discs. These discs, or plates, are generally preserved on the altars of the temples attached to centers where the so-called contemplative or Mahayana Yogacara schools are established. They are written variously, sometimes in Tibetan, but mostly in ideographs. The sacerdotal language, Senza, besides an alphabet of its own, may be rendered in several modes of writing in cipher characters, which partake more of the nature of ideographs than of syllables. Regardless of the book's true origination, though the Mahayana Buddhist influence has been acknowledged by both the Dalai Lama and D.T. Sukuki, for more on this see available online and available online. It does present the teachings of the sound current in a hierarchical fashion that is reminiscent of the Nada Bindu Upanishad, Hatha Yoga Pradipika, and the Sant, Sufi, and Radhasoami traditions. The following provides a comparative overview. The Voice of Silence. 1. Nightingale's sweet voice chanting. 2. Silver cymbal. 3. Ocean sprite imprisoned in its shell, conch. 4. Veena. 5. Bamboo flute. 6. Trumpet blast. 7. Rumbling of a thunder cloud, Nada Bindu Upanishad. 1. Mardala drums. 2. Bell. 3rd horn. 4. Tinkling bells. 5th flute. 6. Veena. 7. Bees. Hatha Yoga Pradipika. 1. Beating jingling drums. 2. Conch. Mridanga. Bells. 3. Tinklets, flute, veena, bees. Radhasoami tradition. 1. Bells, 2nd conch, 3rd sarangi, 4th flute, 5. Veena. Intriguingly, there is historical evidence that Blavatsky was aware of the Radhasoami tradition and their sound current teachings as far back as the 1880s, if not prior, since Alfred Percy Sinnett's 1840-1921 book, The Occult World, 1881, A.P. Sinnett, The Occult World, London, Trubner & Co., 1881, mentions Rai Salig Ram, 1829-1898, the chief disciple and successor of Shiv Dayal Singh, the founder of Radhasoami. Blavatsky and Henry Steele Olcott, the co-founder of Theosophy, postulated that there were masters of the hidden brotherhood. Daniel Caldwell was the first Theosophy scholar to bring this issue to light. These enlightened Mahatmas from Tibet were alleged to have communicated their insights directly to Sinnett through a series of letters. The very idea that such correspondence was even possible came from Blavatsky, who encouraged Sinnett in his mission to have answers to his many spiritual questions. While Hare and Hare, 1936, Harold Edward Hare, William Loftus Hare, who wrote the Mahatma letters. The first thorough examination of the communications, alleged to have been received by the late A.P. Sinnett from Tibetan Mahatmas, London, Williams and Norgate Limited, 1936, systematically argue that these letters are a literary fraud. They do nevertheless reveal actual historical events and persons, which provides a rich resource to better trace the source material from which much of theosophical ideas were drawn. K. Paul Johnson in his book, The Masters Revealed, 1994. K. Paul Johnson, The Masters Revealed, Madame Blavatsky and the Myth of the Great White Lodge, Albany, State University of New York Press, 1994. Goes so far as to suggest that Blavatsky employed cover names, such as Master Kuthumi and Master Maurya, for those gurus and yogis she had actually come in contact with. Blavatsky created a mythology of her own making, but one which was at least partially based on real-life events and personages. In letter 31 of the Mahatma letters, the following passage explicitly mentions Rai Saligram and his philosophy, though clearly trying to show the inferiority of his system, Radhasoami, and his initiating guru, Shiv Dayal Singh, with those of the Theosophical masters. Saligram, a truly good man, yet a devotee of another era, not his guru's voice, his own, the voice of a pure, unselfish, earnest soul, absorbed in misguided, misdirected mysticism. Add to it a chronic disorder in that portion of the brain which responds to clear vision, and the secret is soon told. That disorder was developed by forced visions, by hatha yoga and prolonged asceticism. Ram is the chief medium, and at same time the principal magnetic factor who spreads his disease by infection, unconsciously to himself, who inoculates with his vision all the other disciples. There is one general law of vision, physical and mental or spiritual, but there is a qualifying special law proving that all vision must be determined by the quality or grade of man's spirit and soul, and also by the ability to translate diverse qualities of waves of astral light into consciousness. There is but one general law of life, but innumerable laws qualify and determine the myriads of forms perceived and of sounds heard. There are those who are willingly, and others who are unwillingly, blind. They belong to the former, sensitives to the latter. Unless regularly initiated and trained, concerning the spiritual insight of things, and the supposed revelations made unto man in all ages from Socrates down to Swedenborg and Fern, no self-tutored seer or clairaudient ever saw or heard quite correctly. No harm and much instruction may come to you by joining his society. Go on until he demands what you will be obliged to refuse. Learn and study. You are right. They say and affirm that the one and only God of the universe was incarnated in their guru, and were such an individual to exist, he would certainly be higher than any planetary. But they are idolaters, my friend. Their guru was no initiate, only a man of extraordinary purity of life and powers of endurance. He had never consented to give up his notions of a personal God, and even gods though offered more than once. He was born an orthodox Hindu and died a self-reformed Hindu, something like Kechub Chisen, but higher, purer, and with no ambition to taint his bright soul. Many of us have regretted his self-delusion, but he was too good to be forcibly interfered with. Join them and learn. But remember your sacred promise to KH. 2 months more and he will be with us. I think of sending her to you. The original letters have been photocopied, and one can analyze the transcription error directly and also understand the wider context behind the correspondence. See available online. Daniel Caldwell, a longtime follower of Theosophy and an expert on its early history, discovered that a close reading of the original letter to Sinnett was wrongly transcribed. Instead of Subi Ram, it actually was Salig Ram. Moreover, the society which is referenced is the Radhasoami movement, as founded by Salig Ram's guru Shiv Dayal Singh. It appears that Sinnett was interested in the teaching of Radhasoami, and that the letter from the Mahatma Maurya was a 3-layered critique against Salig Ram, his guru, and the visionary claims made by the tradition, which is labelled disease by infection. Daniel Caldwell writes, "It would appear that in the latter part of 1881, Sinnett had met Rai Salig Ram in Allahabad. Salig Ram told Sinnett about his deceased guru Shiv Dayal Singh. Sinnett, who was at the same time in correspondence with Madame Blavatsky's teachers, wrote to Master Maurya inquiring about Shiv Dayal Singh, Rai Salig Ram, and their claims. Refer to available online." What is curious here, however, is that the sound current teachings of Blavatsky's Voice of Silence and those of Salig Ram's are quite similar, though the Mahatma letters provide no indication of that. It worthy to note that Salig Ram was himself a subscriber to the Theosophist, a monthly magazine published in Adya, India. Because the Voice of Silence was one of Theosophy's most popular publications and is still in print, it has continually introduced Shabd Nad Yoga to thousands and is a common resource for a number of new religious movements. Yogananda and the Self-Realization Fellowship. After Swami Vivekananda (1863 to 1902) first introduced Vedanta at the World Parliament of Religion in Chicago in 1893 and was warmly received. For more on this, see available online. There has been a continual influx of visiting swamis and yogis ever since. In 1920, Paramahansa Yogananda, 1893 to 1952, came to America, and over time his organization's Self-Realization Fellowship, SRF, became well established in the United States, with 2 large centers in Los Angeles and Encinitas in California. His book, Autobiography of a Yogi, 1946, Paramahansa Yogananda, Autobiography of a Yogi, New York, Philosophical Library, 1946, became extremely popular after his death in 1952 and introduced thousands to his version of Kriya Yoga. One key teaching in SRF is the Aum technique of meditation. This is a practice where the aspirant plugs both ears and focuses on listening to the inner sound. As the official SRF website explains, this method shows one how to use the power of concentration in the highest way to discover and develop the divine qualities of one's own true self. This ancient method teaches how to experience the all-pervading divine presence as Aum, the word or Holy Ghost that underlies and sustains all creation. The technique expands the awareness beyond limitations of body and mind to the joyous realization of one's infinite potential, available online. In India, the neophyte is taught a specific version of the Malasana posture, which is essentially squatting and then resting one's elbows on their knees, and then using the right and left thumbs to plug each ear. Another alternative that has gained popularity both in India and abroad is the Baragon, or T-stick, which in SRF is known as the Aum board or meditation armrest. The purpose, of course, is to minimize outside noises so that it is easier to listen to subtle sounds within. For a visual depiction of how the technique is performed, see available online. The intriguing historical question revolves around when, where, and how Yogananda learned of Shabd or Nad Yoga. According to Swami Satyananda Giri, a follower of both Sri Yukteswar and Yogananda, when Mukunda, Yogananda's birth name, was a young boy, he learned the practice of Nad Yoga from a family acquaintance. Charu Babu was a sadhak of the Radhasoami satsang. He revealed to Mukunda, the young Yogananda, the secret of their sadhana, meditation practice, and its methods. The sharp young Mukunda engaged himself in sadhana with full mind and heart, and in a very short duration of time he was able to hear the nada, divine sound, and perceive the apurba dibya jyoti, divine light, and was overwhelmed. Swami Satyananda Giri, Yogananda Sangha, As I Have Seen and Understood Him, Prajna Publications 2021, page 20. In addition, Yogananda's own guru, Sri Yukteswar, from Serampore, was quite conversant with the yoga of the inner sound current. His only published book in English, The Holy Science, describes the ancient practice and even labels it as Surat Sabda Yoga, writes Yukteswar. It will be found how a disciple, while passing through the different stages, becomes able to conceive the different objects of creation in his heart, and how he gradually advances through the states of meditation, and how, ultimately, by concentrating his attention on the sensorium, he perceives the peculiar sound, pranava or sabda, the holy word, at which time the heart becomes divine. Swami Sri Yukteswar, The Holy Science, Los Angeles, Self-Realization Fellowship, 1957. There are several yoga schools which teach Kriya Yoga and that are distinct from the Self-Realization Fellowship, but which share Yogananda's spiritual lineage of gurus from Sri Yukteswar to Lahiri Mahayasa to the mysterious Babaji. For a critical analysis of Yogananda's life and work, see David Christopher Lane's The Skeptical Yogi, Walnut, Mount San Antonio College, 2020. These groups include Swami Kriyananda's Ananda Yoga Movement and Paramahamsa Hariharananda's Kriya Yoga International, each of which also includes sound current meditation as part of their teachings. For more on Kriyananda's organization, refer to available online, and for Kriya Yoga International, go to available online. Prem Rawat and the Divine Light Mission. Although the Divine Light Mission, as originally founded by Hans Ram Singh Rawat, 1900 to 1966, has undergone several transformations after his son, Prem Rawat, 1957 to succeeded his father when he was only 8 years old. The core teaching that was propounded was that of Shabd Yoga. Hans Ram Singh Rawat was an initiate of Beli Ram, honorifically known as Sri Swami Swarupanand Ji Maharaj, (1884 to 1936), who was the second guru in spiritual lineage of Advait Mat, available online. There are also unverified reports that Hans Ram Singh Rawat also took initiation from Sawan Singh of Radhasoami Satsang Bayas, as reported by Kirpal Singh's secretary, Janiji, who provided this information when interviewed at Sawan Ashram in Delhi, India, June 1978. The teachings of this tradition, as founded by Ram Yad, Sri Paramhans Swami Advaitanand Ji Maharaj, 1846 to 1919, are a modern version of Sant Mat, as they readily admit in their literature, making connections to previous sants such as Kabir. The following excerpts from provide a glimpse of their philosophy. Sri Paramhans Advait Mat, 1975. Then the Great souls reincarnated themselves to set right the conditions of the world according to the needs of times. For example, Param Sant Sri Kabir Sahib Ji, Sri Guru Nanak Dev Ji, Sant Tulsi Das Ji, Sant Dadu Dayal Ji, Sant Sahajobai Ji, Sant Dayabai Ji, and numerous other great personalities who were embodiments of spiritual knowledge and devotion to God, appeared to meet the demands of times. Attention will never be concentrated unless it is united the Shabad, inner musical sound, and Nam. Numerous sounds of the world may grant it a momentary comfort, but cannot bestow eternal peace on it. The peculiar restlessness of the conscious will continue till it is united with the Nam, Shabad, bestowed upon by the Master by his own grace. Lord Krishna instigated the Pandavas to perform a yajna, sacrificial fire, which was considered as accomplished when Shwapach Rishi was feasted and the ringing of the bell was heard high up in the sky. This indicates the ringing of the bell within. Yoga is also a yajna. On the completion of the yajna of yoga, ringing of bell will be heard at the Daswan Dwar, 10th portal high up within. Do the bells outside ever ring by themselves? This is an indication towards the Anahad Shabad, celestial song within. Anandpur Trust, Sri Paramhans Advait Mat, Sri Anandpur Trust, 1975. The Divine Light Mission underwent a dramatic transformation in the early 1980s when Prem Rawat disbanded the ashram infrastructure of the organization and altered the direction of his movement to become less overtly religious and more modernized. He also altered the name eventually to Elan Vital, and focused his activities less on his godlike guru status as such, and more as a philanthropic organization, known as the Prem Rawat Foundation, which is designed to promote dignity, peace, and prosperity by addressing the fundamental human needs of food, water, and peace. Critics, however, have raised questions about Prem Rawat's intentions, since much of the donated money is used to support his expensive lifestyle. For an exhaustive yet critical overview of Prem Rawat's life and work, see available online. Those taking initiation into the knowledge that Prem Rawat offered, usually through a series of appointed designees originally called Mahatmas, were given a fourfold meditation technique. 1. Light, where one focuses on the proverbial third eye. 2. Music, where the aspirant plugs each ear and tries to listen to the sound current. 3. Word, which is a pranayama technique where one becomes conscious of a certain breathing pattern and the sound of soham, sohung, sohang. And 4. Nectar, which is a modified version of a yogic practice known as Kechari Mudra, where the tongue is placed at the back of the throat near the nasal passage. The biographical section of the critical Prem Rawat website, available online, provides the following about the history of the Divine Light Mission's meditational practices. According to his followers, Sri Hans was early in his life an egalitarian iconoclast and an opponent of the Hindu caste system. He was originally a member of the Arya Samaj, but left that movement after he met a guru of the Sant Mat tradition, Sri Swarupanand Ji Maharaj. Swarupanand initiated him into the 4 techniques of knowledge or kriyas, which are the centerpiece of his religion. In the 1930s, following the death of his guru, he began to travel in Sindh and Lahore, and later to Delhi. Much of the knowledge that Prem Rawat and his father passed on appears derived, at least in part, from the early yogic manual, the Garanda Samhita, since each of the 4 techniques that they imparted are mentioned in the text, particularly connecting inhaling and exhaling breath with soham. The breath of every person in entering makes the sound of sa, and in coming out, that of ham. These 2 sounds make, soham I am that, or Hamza the Great Swan. The Garanda Samhita, translated by James Mallinson, Woodstock, yogavidya.com, 2004. As for the importance of Shabd in the Divine Light mission in the early days, one disciple explained it thusly: the Mahatma directs you to sit with your thumbs in your ears and your elbows propped up on a wooden board called a bragan. They tell you to concentrate on one of your ears. You begin to hear sounds. Your body makes subtle little noises. Your heart and your blood swishing around it makes noise, and that's what you hear. You have to do it in a really quiet room. Your powers of concentration increase with practice of the techniques. It's really a trip. Your body's out of sight. It makes all these far-out noises, and you can really get into it. Available online. Prem Rawat has modified this knowledge over the past few decades, though his very use of the term dates back to his own father's usage, which he himself learned from his association with Beli Ram and the Advait Mat teachings. Dr. Bhagat Singh Thind and Spiritual Science. Bhagat Singh Thind, 1892 to 1967, was born a Sikh and attended Khalsa College in the Punjab. He was highly influenced by the teachings of Guru Nanak and his successors as codified in the Sri Guru Granth Sahib. He came to the United States in 1913 and in July 1918 enlisted in the army. His application for American citizenship led to a controversial Supreme Court decision when it was declared that since the common man's definition of white did not include Indians, they could not be naturalized. For more on this, see the legal case here, available online. By the mid-1920s, Bhagat Singh Thind started a lecture series on metaphysics that eventually took him throughout the country. Although he based much of his teachings on Sant Mat, he was eclectic in his presentations. He was fond of quoting Emerson and Whitman, and gave talks on health, breathing, and diet. For more on this, refer to the authorized biography by Amanda de la Garza, Dr. G, The Life Teachings and Legacy of Dr. Bhagat Singh Thind, Malibu, David Bhagat Thind, publisher, 2010. His 1939 book, Radiant Road to Reality, Bhagat Singh Thind, Radiant Road to Reality, New York, privately published, 1939, provides an outline of his teachings, which focused on how to achieve liberation or enlightenment by Nam and Shabd Bhakti. As summarized on the official website devoted to his legacy, Nam, the sound within. Nam, the holy name, is Shabda, the word sound. Before creation, Shabda was hidden. It was nameless. Before the Shabda there was neither sun nor moon, nor Akasha nor fire. It was formless. In the beginning there was the Word was with God, the Word was God. In it a desire rose and currents issued forth one after the other, and through their interplay creation began. The sound current is the most stupendous and vital fact in all the realms of nature, and to emphasize its utter importance for salvation of the soul, saviors have come to our humanity and bolstered this great truth. Every force moving from a static to a dynamic expression must vibrate from the potential to the actual, and vibration is the sound of the current running between, to, and from the universal to the individual. The great power of the Shabda sound current is like a magnet pulling the soul upward, and without the soul's transcendence, salvation is not possible. Shabda is the spirit sound current. It is substance quality vibration. It is life current which has originally emanated from the Supreme Being and is the only means of taking and raising the spirit to the source from which it emanated. Shabda is the bridge that carries the devotee across the chasm of birth and death to the bosom of the eternal. It is like a ship carrying souls across the oceans of birth and death to the port of paradise in the land of immortality. Dr. Bhagat Singh Thind's only son, David Bhagat Thind, has been the driving force in keeping his father's writings and teachings available to the public. See his official website honoring him, available online. Kirpal Singh, 1894 to 1974, founder of Ruhani Satsang, alleges that Bhagat Singh Thind was initiated by Sawan Singh, 1858 to 1948, of Radhasoami Satsang Bayas, and that he learned the technique of listening to the inner sound from him. When I went to America, there was one gentleman, he's passed away now, a Sikh gentleman who was giving talks on payment. His name was Dr. Bhagat Singh Thind. He married a French lady. He was initiated by Baba Sawan Singh, I know, definitely. Kirpal Singh, Heart to Heart Talks, Volume 1, edited by Malcolm Tillis, Delhi, Ruhani Satsang, 1976, pages 87 to 88. Thind never admitted the connection, and instead claimed he learned the truth from another unnamed guru. It is now well documented that Thind was familiar with Radhasoami Bayas' teachings, as some of his own writings were lifted, almost verbatim, from Julian P. Johnson's writings. Andrea Diem Lane provides extensive side-by-side comparisons of the two texts in her book, The Guru in America. Radhasoami Literature. With a Great Master in India, first published 1934, second edition 1953, page 164. Gather together mind and soul again and again, and bring them inside. Then behold a window. And beyond that an open maiden, O field. Concentrate the attention upon that and hold it there. You will see a 5-colored flower garden, and inside of that, behold the jyoti, candle or light. Enjoy this scene for some days, then see the blue-colored sky appearing like a chakra, circular disc. Impelled by love and longing, pierce through this. Then gaze at the jyoti with detached mind, hear the unending bell sound and become absorbed in it. Next, you will hear the conch. Let yourself become saturated with it. In that region are suns and moons and stars. Sikh Study Group Literature. Radiant Road to Reality. Tested Science of Religion, published 1939, pages 127 to 28. Gather together mind and soul and bring them inside. You will behold a window, and through its narrow passage a vast field. Steadily set your fixed gaze upon it, and keep it there until you are able to see a 5-colored flower garden, and inside of it you shall see jyoti, candle or light. See the blue-colored sky appearing like a circular disc. With intense longing, pierce through it. Keep looking and enjoying it, jyoti, with detached mind. Soon you will be hearing an unending bell sound. Get yourself absorbed in it. Next you will hear the conch. Let yourself become saturated with it. In this region of Sahasdal Kanwal are seen innumerable galaxies of suns, moons, stars. Example 2. Here the second spiritual region, Trikuti, is delineated. While the reports are basically the same, Thind replaces a few terms. For instance, he refers to the Guru as Satguru and the Master's Shabd Rup as the Saviour's Shabda Ray. Furthermore, Thind sometimes omits Indian references, such as Johnson's mention of the 5th Veda. Finally, it should be noted that Thind misspells Trikuti as Tirkuti. Why? Because he is using an early edition of With a Great Master in India in which the typo appears. However, in later editions of Johnson's book, Trikuti is correctly spelled. Andrea Diem Lane, The Guru in America, The Influence of Radhasoami on New Religions, Walnut, Mount San Antonio College, 2015, Chapter 4. Dr. Bhagat Singh Thind, he earned his doctorate in the mid-1910s, wrote a number of books, including House of Happiness, 1931, and Science of Union with God, 1955. For a fuller listing of Dr. Bhagat Singh Thind's books, pamphlets, and other materials, go to available online. During his lifetime he instructed thousands into his teachings, and today his son, David, has continued to promote his father's work, and has republished a number of his books, lectures, and pamphlets. On the official Dr. Bhagat Singh Thind website, he provides a succinct summary of his father's ministry, where he desired to continue the transmission of truths that he gave to over 5 million Americans during his 56 years of teaching based on spiritual science or Sant Mat, the teachings of Guru Nanak, the founder of Sikhism. Available online. Swami Muktananda and Siddha Yoga. Swami Muktananda, 1908 to 1982, was trained by his guru, Bhagawan Nityananda, 1897 to 1961, in the Shaktipat tradition. Swami Muktananda, Bhagawan Nityananda of Ganeshpuri, New York Siddha Yoga Publications, 1996, where the master yogi transmits spiritual energy directly to his or her disciple, usually by touch, a sacred word, darshan, or by thought transference. The belief system has much of its origin in Tantrism and has correlations with Kashmir Shaivism. There is extensive literature on Tantrism and Kashmir Shaivism which forms the background teachings of Muktananda's version of Shaktipat. For a general scholarly overview, refer to Mark S. G. Dyczkowski, The Doctrine of Vibration, an analysis of the doctrines and practices of Kashmir Shaivism, Albany, State University of New York Press, 1987. Although Albert Rudolph, later more widely known as Rudy or Swami Rudrananda, 1928 to 1973, John Mann, Before the Sun, Meeting Rudy, Seattle, CreateSpace Independent Publishing, 2014. This is an unedited version of an earlier book by a man entitled Rudi, 14 Years with My Teacher, Cambridge Rudra Press, 1987, taught aspects of Shaktipat. It was not until Swami Muktananda made his first tour to the United States in 1970 and later established Siddha Yoga Dharma Associates in 1976 that his distinctive Shaktipat teachings became widely known. Swami Prakashananda, Baba Muktananda, A Biography, Mountain View, Sarasvati Productions, 2007. Muktananda's autobiography, The Play of Consciousness, 1974, is a revealing autobiography about his years practicing spiritual sadhana and what he had achieved through arduous hours of yoga and meditation. Besides having ecstatic visions, culminating in his beholding the blue pearl, which he claims makes one the most blessed of all human beings, Muktananda describes at length of hearing inner sounds, which he refers to as nada. In the meditation which follows Kundalini awakening, the inner music or nada of Soham can be heard, and all a seeker needs to do is keep listening to it all the time. Nothing is higher than this nada. Once you begin to hear it in the spiritual center at the crown of the head, you will hear it vibrating every particle of your body. This is the voice of God. Quoted from the Siddha Yoga page on Swami Muktananda's teachings, available online. Listening to the inner sound current has become a key element in all of Siddha Yoga's teachings. After Muktananda's death, there was a succession dispute between Swami Chidvilasananda and her brother, Swami Nityananda, which led to a split that has never been mended. Today, Swami Chidvilasananda, known among followers as Guru Mai, is the sole head of Muktananda's organization. An in-depth look at the succession split after Muktananda's death and the many controversies surrounding the Siddha Yoga movement are covered in Lise Harris, O Guru, 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 New Yorker, November 7, 1994. She has a large following, despite the fallout that occurred, and still continues, after the Co-Evolution Quarterly, winter 1983, published Willem Rodamore's The Secret Life of Swami Muktananda, which graphically detailed the Guru's many sexual transgressions and fondness for money. Mark Foreman and Leslie Fishelman, Swami Muktananda and Stroke, The Untold Medical Story of a Brilliant Guru's Tarnished Legacy, Elephant Journal, September 15, 2014, provide a possible medical explanation for the Swami's nefarious actions, suggesting that his bad health from 1976 onwards led to his demented activities. See available online. Today, the Siddha Yoga path has many centers around the world, with a large presence in India, Australia, and the United States. Guru Mai states that her mission is for awakening seekers to their own potential for enlightenment, which is accomplished by bestowing Shaktipat, available online. Siddha Yoga emphasis on Nada Yoga has similarities with the Divine Light mission, since both groups have developed their breathing techniques that can be found in the Garanda Samhita, where the inhaling and exhaling of one's breath follows the sound of Soham. On the official Siddha website, there are several testimonies given by Siddha Yoga students about the efficacy of hearing the sound current. I began to coordinate my in-breath and out-breath with the mantra Soham in meditation. I experienced that each breath was radiating tiny particles of scintillating light, all vibrating with the primordial sound of Aum. It seemed to me that my whole being consisted of these tiny shimmering particles of light, vibrating in unison. Last February, when I arrived for the pilgrimage to the Heart Retreat in Gurudev Siddha Peeth, I felt Baba's grace descend upon me, and I experienced the ongoing inner nada expanding out, encompassing the sacred grounds of the ashram. As I walked along the garden paths, the divine nada seemed to permeate all the trees and plants, and I could see sparkling particles dancing in the air. Time stopped, perception of separation disappeared, and all that existed was the bliss of nada. As I sat for meditation this morning, I recalled the teaching from Baba that is posted on the homepage. I focused on the sound of my breathing for a while, and then I brought my awareness to the crown of my head and listened for the inner music of Soham. Although I did not hear the nada, I did feel strong pulsations of energy there. And the very act of listening added a new dimension to my practice of meditation. My mind became very focused and still, and I sat for a long time in a state of blissful peace. Thank you so much for posting Baba's teaching this day following the intensive. I intend to keep practicing it and look forward to seeing what will happen. Available online. Paul Twitchell and Eckankar. Eckankar was founded by Paul Twitchell, 1909 to 1971, in California in the mid-1960s. Although the Hindi Punjabi term Ek Onkar, literally one God power, was most likely derived from Guru Nanak's Japji, the first set of hymns in the Sikh holy book, Guru Granth Sahib, Twitchell altered its original phonetic spelling and definition, claiming that Eckankar was a Tibetan Pali word meaning co-worker with God. According to Twitchell, Eckankar was an ancient spiritual path with a lineage of 970 Ek masters who trace back to Gakko, who brought the true teachings of soul travel from the city of Retz on the planet Venus. Twitchell alleged that through this bilocation philosophy, a neophyte can leave his or her body via an inner light and sound and soul travel to higher regions of consciousness, which lead ultimately to the Supreme Lord Sugmad. The living Ekmaster, occasionally retaining the more exalted title of Mahanta, the highest state of God consciousness on earth, is central to Eckankar theology because it is through his guidance that the student, known as a Chela, receives various levels of initiation, usually involving instructions into new sacred tones and other higher-level practices of contemplation. In an early article entitled The Cliffhanger, published in Psychic Observer in 1964, Twitchell explained the basis behind his new group. Eckankar, which I formed out of my own experience, is the terms used for the philosophy I have developed for the cliffhanger. It is based on Shabd Yoga, a way-out form of yoga. The word is the Hindu locution for the cosmic sound current which is known in our vernacular as the cosmic river of God. This section contains edited excerpts from David Christopher Lane's The Making of a Spiritual Movement, The Untold Story of Paul Twitchell and Eckankar, Del Mar Press, 1983, and Gakko Came from Venus, Exploring the Lost History of Eckankar, Walnut, Mount San Antonio College, 2020. Eckankar has weathered a fair storm of controversy since its inception, primarily because of questions concerning Twitchell's alleged plagiarism, biographical redactions, and purported historical antecedents. First, Twitchell claimed that while traveling in Europe and India, he was taught Eckankar by the two former masters who preceded him, Sudha Singh of Allahabad and Rebazar Taz, a supposed 500-year-old Tibetan monk. However, there is no documented evidence proving that Twitchell had visited these countries when he claimed he did, or that either Sudha Singh or Rebazar Taz are genuine historical figures. Rather, there is ample evidence, even from Twitchell's own pen, that he was associated with Swami Premananda of the Self-Revelation Church of Absolute Monism in Washington, D.C., from 1950 to 1955, when he was asked to leave the church compounds for personal misconduct. Additionally, Twitchell received initiation into Shabd Yoga in 1955 from Kirpal Singh, the founder of Ruhani Satsang in Delhi, India, while the Guru was on his first tour of the United States. He kept in close contact with Kirpal Singh via correspondence for at least a decade and took his wife Gail to see the Indian Guru and have her receive initiation from him in San Francisco in 1963. Twitchell also joined L. Ron Hubbard's Church of Scientology in the 1950s and eventually served for a short time as his press agent and wrote a number of articles for the group. With the founding of Eckankar, however, Twitchell altered his biography and redacted references to his former teachers and replaced them with a hierarchy of Ek masters. A number of Twitchell's books on Eckankar contain large chunks of material appropriated from sources he failed to reference. For more on this, see also Ford Johnson's Confessions of a God-Seeker, A Journey to Higher Consciousness, Silver Spring, One Publishing Company, 2003. Doug Marmon, a longtime Eckankar member and an authority on the history of the movement, has provided his own apologetic for Paul Twitchell's actions in The Whole Truth. The Spiritual Legacy of Paul Twitchell, Spiritual Dialogues Project, 2007. Twitchell seemed particularly fond of plagiarizing whole passages from Radhasoami Satsang Bayas author Julian Johnson, whose two books, With a Great Master in India, 1934, and The Path of the Masters, 1939, contributed to much of Eckankar's specialized terminology that draws extensively from the Sant Mat tradition of North India, an eclectic spiritual movement that includes such poet-saints as Kabir Dadu and Tulsi Sahib. As the former president of Eckankar, Dr. Lewis Bluth, confessed in a letter after Paul Twitchell's death, dated June 19, 1980, "My wife and I opened the first ECK class in Sun City, California. I personally treated Paul Twitchell many times and was the main speaker in Cincinnati when he passed away. Paul was a sincere student in the beginning, and I considered him honest. Problems between him and his wife Gail led him to believe she was going to leave him, and he desperately wanted to keep her. So when she demanded more money and better living, he started to write things and copy from other books. He, Paul Twitchell, borrowed my books on Radhasoami and copied a large share from them. I helped him write the Herb book and went to Riverside University and took Sanskrit, so basically much of the material is good because it is copied. I confronted him, Paul Twitchell, with what he had done, and his answer was, 'Since the author of the book said it better than I could, I copied it.' The trouble is that he never gave anyone credit as to where he got it." Refer to available online. Eckankar has become an exceptionally successful religion with centers spanning the globe. Interestingly, Eckankar has a strong presence in Africa, particularly Nigeria, and in Europe, and it continues to draw thousands to its yearly conferences. While Eckankar has been directly influenced by the Self-Realization Fellowship, Theosophy, Scientology, and particularly Sant Mat, via its specialized version of sound current yoga, it has in turn influenced a number of new religious offshoots, including the Movement of Spiritual Inner Awareness, MSYA, founded by John Roger Hinkins, Masterpath, founded by Gary Olson, the Ancient Teachings of the Masters, a TOM, founded by Darwin Gross, the Divine Science of Light and Sound, founded by Jerry Mulvin, the Sonic Spectrum, founded by Michael Turner, and the Higher Consciousness Society, founded by Ford Johnson. Each of the founders of these groups was at one time a member of Eckankar, and they have all incorporated many Ek terms and ideas into their respective organizations. Eckankar's future looks bright as it enters its 5th decade of existence. While Twitchell made the sound current, or Ek, a cardinal feature of his teachings, he argued that his understanding and practice of it was unique, since he came from an unbroken lineage of masters that was distinct from Radhasoami. In the Shariat Ki Sugmad, 1970, one of the holy scriptures of Eckankar, Twitchell describes the Shabd thusly: "The word, the voice of the Sugmad God, goes forth like a wave from the center of a pond, and sings its way through all the plains in many different songs and melodies. Each is the living word, creating and giving life to everything in each world. By its very life, this Ek, the essence of the Sugmad, the spirit of all things, life exists. When it reaches the end of the worlds, it returns like the wave, gathering up all souls that are ready to do God's work. They are returned to the true home and become co-workers with God, having completed their mission in life." The official Eckankar website, which contains multiple quotes from their holy scriptures, can be found here, available online. Today, the current leader of Eckankar is Harold Klemp, 1942 to present, who succeeded Darwin Gross, 1928 to present, was appointed by Twitchell's widow, Gail Atkinson, after her husband died of heart failure in 1971. For more on this, see SCP Journal Eckankar, A Hard Look at a New Religion, Volume 3, Number 1. Klemp, who eventually excommunicated his former predecessor after a contentious legal battle, has spread the Eckankar teachings throughout the world, gathering a significant following in Africa. He has published a number of books, including Autobiography of a Modern Prophet, 2000, Spiritual Exercises of Ek, 1993, and The Art of Spiritual Dreaming, 1999. After Darwin Gross was excommunicated from Eckankar, all of his books were removed from sale. His picture and even a detailed description of his tenure has been excised from all of Eckankar's related materials. Eckankar uses the Hu chant as one of their key mantras, and in meetings with their spiritual leader, Harold Klemp, it often begins with those in attendance, usually several thousand, chanting the word in a melodious fashion. As Eckankar's official website explains, Hu is an ancient name for God. It has been used for thousands of years as a prayer and sacred chant to attune oneself to the presence of God. Millions of people around the world have experienced the joy of Hu. In many spiritual traditions, sound plays an important part in uplifting the individual. Hu is a key to open your heart to God's loving presence in your life. Anyone can sing Hu, regardless of age or religion. It is a simple technique that can be used as part of your daily spiritual practice. It has the power to uplift you spiritually for inner peace, healing, and insight. It is a gift to you, and for anyone looking to experience more divine love in life. The Sufi influence on Eckankar's usage of hu is obvious. Eckankar's promotion of the sound current as central to its teachings can be gleaned from many of Twitchell's books and articles. One significant change that Twitchell brought about in Eckankar was his restructuring of the traditional Radhasoami Ruhani Satsang 8-plane cosmology. Twitchell did this, though, only after having used the original Sant-Mat cosmology in several of his earlier books, most notably in The Tiger's Fang and The Far Country. The intriguing aspect is that Twitchell's revised and copyrighted 12-plane cosmology, which is given in the Spiritual Notebook and was standard in Eckankar by 1971, contravenes his previous 8-plane one. The following is a comparison chart of the two cosmologies original, based upon the Sant and Radhasoami traditions, depicted in Twitchell's first books on Eckankar. 1. Sahasra Dal Kanwal, sounds, bell and conch. 2. Brahmlok Trikuti, sounds, big drum, thunder. 3. Daswandwar, sounds, violins, sarangi. 4. Panwargufa, sounds, flute. 5. Sachkhand, sounds, veena, bagpipe. 6th Alaklok. 7th Agamlok. 8. Anamilok, Sugmad. Revised as given in the Spiritual Notebook and Standard by 1970. 1. Alam, physical, sounds, thunder. 2. Sat, Kanwal Anda, astral, sounds, roar of the sea. 3. Mahakal / Par Brahm, causal, sounds, tinkle of bells. 4. Brahmanda Brahm, mental, sounds, running water. 5. Satnam, soul, sounds, single note of flute. 6. Alaklok, sounds, heavy wind. 7. Alayalok, sounds, deep humming. 8. Hukikatlok, sounds, thousand violins. 9. Agamlok, sounds, music of woodwinds. 10. Anamilok, sounds, whirlpool. 11. Sugmadlok, sounds, music of universe. 12. Sugmad, living reality, sounds, music of God. The most noticeable difference in the two cosmologies is in the location of the various sounds, known in Radhasoami as shabduns. Note that in the first 8-plane cosmology, the sound of the flute is heard on the 4th plane, Banwar Gufa, one region below Sachkhand, the eternal soul realm, whereas in the 12-plane chart, the sound of the flute is now heard on the 5th plane, Satnam, the soul region. This difference, while perhaps not noteworthy in any other spiritual tradition, is elemental in Shabd Yoga, where the whole essence of the path is based upon the internal hearing of the sound current, or audible life stream. The knowledge of which sounds to listen to and which to discard is an extremely important part of the teachings. Other variances in the cosmologies include 1. The sound of the thunder, which was heard in Trikuti, causal realm, in the original Sant-Mat cosmology is now according to the 12-plane chart heard in the physical region, Elam. 2. The tinkle of bells, which was originally heard up to and through the first plane, Sahasra Dal Kanwal, is now heard in the third region, Mahakal Par Brahm. 3. Par Brahm, which used to be in Daswandwar, i.e., beyond mind and matter, is now in the causal realm, a region which was previously in Trikuti, the home of the mind. The preceding comparisons are important in understanding that, although Twitchell employed basic Sant-Mat concepts in the beginning of his group, the teachings themselves have undergone an evolution in Eckankar. This not only signals Twitchell breaking off from Ruhani Satsang doctrines via his former guru, Kirpal Singh, but also indicates an evolving and not a stationary superstructure within Eckankar. More precisely, what may have been taught in Eckankar in 1965 and 1966 may not necessarily be disseminated today. David Christopher Lane, The Making of a Spiritual Movement, The Untold Story of Paul Twitchell and Eckankar, Del Mar Press, 1983, Chapter 7. Eckankar is not unique in altering its sound current cosmology, since the same has occurred to varying degrees in other yogic movements as well. It is of interest to note which sound is considered the highest, or the last, in various yoga manuals and traditions. Sometimes it is thunder or a drum, sometimes it is the flute, and sometimes it is the veena. Invariably, though, the texts speak of that sound which is ultimately soundless. What is intriguing here, from both a sociological and historical perspective, is to chart the evolution of certain core ideas and techniques and how they can remain relatively the same over the course of time and/or get modified depending on the circumstance. After the ascension of Harold Klemp, there have been a number of offshoots which share much of Eckankar's theology, but which, in turn, developed their own unique variations. 1. John Roger Hinkins and the Movement of Spiritual Inner Awareness, MSYA. In 1968, John Roger Hinkins, 1934 to 2014, who was raised in the Church of Latter-day Saints and became a high school teacher, started his spiritual ministry in Rosemead, California. He named it the Movement of Spiritual Inner Awareness, MSYA. John Roger, or J.R. as he was affectionately termed, was associated with Paul Twitchell and Eckankar, having been a male correspondent member and a second initiate. There are also reports that he was connected with other metaphysical groups, learning firsthand about meditation, light attunement, and aura balancing, which he later incorporated into his own movement. For a sympathetic history of John Roger Hinkins and MSIA, see James R. Lewis's Seeking the Light, Uncovering the Truth About the Movement of Spiritual Inner Awareness and its founder. John Roger, Los Angeles, Mandeville Press, 1998. And for a critical analysis of the leader and his organization, see Peter McWilliams' Life 102, What to Do When Your Guru Sues You, Los Angeles, Prelude Press, 1994. Although Hinkins' name appears in Twitchell's newsletter, dated in the late 1960s, as a convener for Eckankar-sponsored meetings in Southern California, John Roger did not see his connection with Paul Twitchell as a master-disciple or teacher-student relationship. Be that as it may, the fact remains, however, that his group and his teachings are almost exactly the same as those taught by Paul Twitchell, not even accepting particular Twitchellian nuances. Likewise, some MSIA initiates recall that in the early meetings J.R. would call in the spirit of brother Paul Twitchell as a master conversant in soul travel. The J.R. Controversy, a critical analysis of John Roger Hinkins and MSIA, Understanding Cults and Spiritual Movements, Volume 1, Issue 1, 1984. MSIA's organizational structure is almost parallel to Twitchell's group with regard to initiation, discourses, and cosmology. John Roger is known to members of MSIA as the physical manifestation of the mystical traveler consciousness, MTC, an all-powerful inner spirit that guides the progress of soul travelers. This concept, by the way, is quite similar to the Satguru in the Radhasoami tradition and the Mahanta in Eckankar. According to Roger's account, the mantleship of the MTC was passed on to him in or around 1963. During this time, Roger claims to have met Sawan Singh, the late Radhasoami Satsang Bayas master who died in 1948. J.R. holds that Sawan Singh was the previous receptor of the MTC and passed on the keys to the kingdom to him on the inner spiritual planes. In the beginning, however, J.R. did not recognize the luminous being as Sawan Singh. At first, he alleged to be in communication with Rebazar Taz, a 500-year-old Tibetan monk, who was a fictional character created by Paul Twitchell to hide his past associations. Accordingly, it was only later, when Roger saw a photograph of the Radhasoami Guru, that he placed the picture of Sawan Singh with the powerful entity he encountered in meditation. Before John Roger Hinkins died, he appointed John Morton as his successor. While MSYA acknowledges that it looks similar to other religions, it argues that it is unique. MSIA has been described as being similar or connected with various groups, i.e., Sant Mat, Christian Charismatics, Radhasoami, Eckankar, Science of Mind, and many other religious groups. In fact, however, MSIA is a new look at ancient teachings that may parallel many that are taught in other faiths. MSIA has something for everyone, which is perhaps why people have associated it with so many other religions. What makes MSIA unique is the mystical traveler consciousness, which works directly with students in MSI. The official MSIA website provides its own historical overview, refer to available online. Since the inception of MSIA, John Roger has infused his group with a variety of teachings, practices, and New Age techniques from other spiritual traditions. The central tenet focuses on the sound current and the mystical traveler of consciousness. For instance, compare MSIA's cosmology, as found in The Sound Current by John Roger, 1976, with Twitchell's cosmology, as found in The Spiritual Notebook by Paul Twitchell, 1971, Paul Twitchell's cosmology, region and sound. 1. Physical, thunder. 2. Astral, roar of the sea. 3. Causal, tinkle of bells. 4. Mental, running water. 5. Soul, single note of flute. 6. Alak-lok, heavy wind. 7. Alaya-lok, deep humming. 8. Hukikat-lok, thousand violins. 9. Agam-lok, music of woodwinds. John Rogers' cosmology, region and sound. 1. Physical thunder. 2. Astral, roaring surf. 3. Causal, tinkle of bells. 4. Mental, running water. 5. Soul, sound of flute. Sound of wind, humming sound. 10,000 violins, sound of woodwinds. Rogers' cosmology is exactly the same as Paul Twitchell's. This is unusual because of Twitchell's own creative implantations, which were uniquely his own. Both of the above schemas represent a distinct departure from the Radhasoami esoteric version, which was the primary source for Twitchell's understanding of the sound current and Surat Shabd yoga practice. John Roger would often incorporate terminology from other Shabd yoga-related movements and then redefine them in light of his own teachings. A good illustration of this is how he transformed Sarmad as a term for God, apparently changing it from the Eckankar word Sugmad. Apparently, John Roger transposed Twitchell's term Sugmad, which stands for the highest lord, into Msia's Sarmad. In any case, Sarmad is actually the name given for a famous Jewish Sufi mystic of the 17th century in India who died a martyr because of his claim that he was one with God. The mystic sublime, Rubaiyat-e Sarmad, edited and translated by Fazl Mahmud Asiri, Walnut, Mount San Antonio College, 2021. Roger, coincidentally, has also taken over the five-name mantra from the Radhasoami Bayas and Ruhani Satsangs. In doing so, though, JR has rearranged the order in two of the names, showing once again how he has adopted earlier terminology and altered it for his own purposes. In my several personal interviews with John Roger Hinkins, both in person and on the phone, 1977 to 1983, he once quite candidly told me the 5 sacred tones that he gave out sequentially to his students. These were identical to the 5-name mantra given out at initiation at Radhasoami Satsang Bayas, and most of these groups related to them, such as Kirpal Singh's Ruhani Satsang. Apparently, John Roger learned them directly from a former disciple of Charan Singh. However, John Roger juxtaposed the second name with the third, reversing the order. John Roger, an MSA1A advocate listening to the inner sound current, and suggests that it is a direct method for attaining God realization. There is a sound of God on each level, otherwise known as the sound current. The sound is a very high form of ultimate reality. Once you get into the soul realm and above, the light is not seen in exactly the same way as it is in the lower realms. It is impressed on you and heard. It is primarily sound and secondly light. Accordingly, on every level of light, in every plane, in every dimension, there is a keeper of the sound current. Appointed by Sat Nam, this is the one who is granted the keys to the sound current and who is known as the mystical traveler consciousness. The traveler has the keys on every realm for the flow of light and the sound current. The sound current does not necessarily work by your calling on it. With the sound current, you have to move your consciousness into it. This doesn't happen by desire. You cannot wish it so or even imagine it into reality. In fact, there is no imagination involved in this process. There are different sounds that accompany the different levels. Just because you read that the sound of the soul level is similar to a haunting flute, this doesn't mean that you will hear it. You may mock it up with your imagination, and that's what it will be, an imaginative mock-up. Hearing the sound current is hearing the sound current, and it is not an act of creative imagination. The sound current is an audible form of reality on the inner planes. The part inside you that does the spiritual exercises from a spiritual base cannot be deceived or manipulated. You will hear the sounds when you hear them. The information is simply offered so that you can validate the experience when it happens, quoted from available online. What is most intriguing is how John Roger redefines which sounds the aspirant should hear and on which level of consciousness. Where the Sant and Radhasoami traditions relegate the buzzing sound to the first plane, John Roger locates it higher up on the etheric plane. He also lists a much larger database of sounds, claiming that there are at least 27 levels above soul with concomitant sounds. As he elaborates, on the astral level, the sound current is akin to the whoosh of ocean surf. On the causal, it's chimes or tinkling bells, a very delicate sound. In the mental level, it's like running water or a tumbling brook. In the etheric, it's a buzzing sound such as made by a bee or a fly. In the soul, there is a flute-like sound, but it is not an ordinary flute. It is a haunting, almost drawing to you sound. It's not tugging, because you'll have no resistance. You will go to it. That is the sound referred to in the Bible. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That is a sound from the soul level of God which exists perennially in each person. To hear only takes awakening to that which comes through the soul. There are at least 27 levels above soul, with concomitant sounds. When you get above the first level, the sound is like a cool summer wind blowing through easily swaying trees. John Roger also connects with both Sufism and Eckankar in mentioning the efficacy of the hue sound and how it is heard when you transcend the third level of soul. John Roger Hinkins is much more descriptive in detailing the ins and outs of which sounds one may hear. Above that level, it sounds as if thousands of violins are playing or angels are singing. It is the beautiful sound that is often described in Greek mythology. The allegories of the sound of God and the sound that comes from the heavens exist in literature throughout recorded time. When Jesus said that the wind comes where it comes and goes where it goes, and that no one knows where it comes and where it goes, he was referring to the sound of God. John 3:8. When you get above the third level of soul, into the inaccessible levels, you hear the sound of HU. Just the HU described in words or reproduced with the HU man voice. They are inner sounds beyond description on the physical level, available online. MSYA offers soul transcendence and various level of initiations where the student receives different tones or names for their spiritual growth. In 1988, John Roger passed the keys to the mystical traveler consciousness to John Morton, and they both worked together as spiritual guides until he died in 2014. Available online. 2. Gary Olson and Masterpath. Gary Olson, 1948 to present, was a follower of Eckankar for several years, but branched off and started his own group, Masterpath, after Harold Klemp took over from Darwin Gross. Masterpath teachings draw primarily from two sources, Eckankar and Radhasoami Satsang Bayas. For more on this, see Andrea Diem Lane's The Guru in America, Walnut Mount San Antonio College, 1995, Chapter 5 and Appendix 4. Also refer to Dennis Holtier's From Light to Sound, The Spiritual Progression, Blue Star Publications, Inc., 1995. However, Gary Olson believes that his movement stands out from the rest. Even if there are striking similarities, there are three major principles that make the Masterpath and the light and sound teachings stunningly different from all other pursuits. 1. The presence of a true guru, in contrast to a pseudo-guru. A sat, or true, guru is commissioned by the highest, while pseudo-gurus are self-commissioned. A true guru is sanctioned to initiate the soul into the spiritual current, while pseudo-gurus desire the devotee to worship the personality of the guru or even one's own personality. 2. The pursuit of the sound current, in contradistinction to the light. The sound is the primordial current emanating from the supreme deity, while the light is the vast array of mental knowledge issuing forth from the mental realms. The light states that morality, or the power of positivity, is the preferred way to attain spirituality, while the sound unequivocally states that both the positive and negative powers are part and parcel of the universal mind, neither of which can secure emancipation. 3. Attainment of self and God. Realization before the translation of the physical body. Spiritual liberation is the goal. To be liberated suggests an ability to transcend all personal karma, which means rising above all the tendencies of the conscious, subconscious, and unconscious minds until the soul stands alone in all of its glory. This is self-realization. At this juncture, the soul can recognize and properly worship the supreme deity and has all the spiritual qualities and attributes at its disposal to do so. The mind is literally incapable of recognizing and worshipping the divine. Masterpath.org. The official Masterpath website offers a free introductory book, Soul's Divine Journey, and other materials introducing the uniqueness of Gary Olson's approach to the sound and light teachings. Unlike Paul Twitchell and John Roger Hinkins, Gary Olson claims he was Swadha saint, born as an enlightened master, and has a direct connection with anami, or the highest state of being. The idea of a born saint is not unique to Masterpath, as similar claims have been made about Kabir, Guru Nanak, Tulsi Sahib, and Shiv Dayal Singh. Arguably, by not connecting to a previous lineage, the new master can be free from any succession disputes that may arise from rival contenders. Genealogical dissociation is a much more common occurrence in new religious movements, and old ones as well, than one might at first suspect. This is not surprising, since claiming to be sui generis offers the would-be guru and his organization much more latitude than being bound to the earlier traditions to which he or she is beholden. He does not mention having any intermediaries such as Rebazar Tars or Sawan Singh passing on their mantleship to him. In response to a query posted on his website about the necessity of getting initiation from a competent master, even if one becomes a master him or herself, Olson gave the following exception. "You are exactly right. Although receiving the spiritual mantle through credible lineage is the accepted way in 99% of the cases, it is not the only way. Founding saints who descend from the heights of Anamilok do not technically require the outer initiation, for they descended directly from the Godhead and are already divinely ignited and appointed through Anami's perfect love and mercy." This was the case with both Guru Nanak and with Swamiji of Agra, for they were also responsible for founding new lineages of living masters. However, even the Param saints must refamiliarize themselves with the light and sound doctrine when they enter a new incarnation. Thus, since the earmark of a Param saint's arrival is the customary absence of a fully realized master, in their great humility, these founding saints take initiation from a lesser order of master, or in some cases even a self-realized soul, and they serve and fulfill all of the requirements of true chelaship. Gary Olson, Soul's Divine Journey, Temecula, Masterpath 2005, page 121. Olson goes on to admit, however, that he first got exposed to Shabd Yoga teachings when he saw Charan Singh in Minneapolis, Minnesota on his first world tour in 1964, and that years later he took initiation from Darwin Gross of Eckankar, with whom he stayed with for 14 years. Olson, 2005, page 121. But in an effort to separate himself from both traditions, Gary Olson went on to write that, "But in truth, none of these wonderful teachings can be given the exclusive credit for my own initiation, liberation, and ensuing salvation. For Anami Purush is my true Lord and Master, nor is the Masterpath an extension of any of these aforementioned paths. For it was Anami Purush who graciously sanctioned, commissioned, and orchestrated the inception of Masterpath and its current living master in July of 1987. Olson, 2005, p. 121. Yet, in publishing his many books on Masterpath, Gary Olson, like Paul Twitchell of Eckankar, appropriated large parts of Radhasoami Satsang Bayas publications without attribution. Such accusations of plagiarism led Gary Olson to issue a worldwide apology on the Internet in 1995, wherein he wrote, "Masterpath has utilized a number of Radhasoami Satsang Bayas publications in their written discourses. However, it has not properly cited or referenced these copyrighted materials. Masterpath regrets this mistake and is committed to revising all of their publications in order to clearly identify Radhasoami masters and books when quoted. Masterpath accepts full responsibility for improperly using copyrighted materials and will refrain from doing so in the future." Masterpath also apologizes for any confusion this may have caused. Andrea Diem Lane has provided extensive documentation of Masterpath's appropriations from Radhasoami books, particularly Charan Singh's Word Eternal. Here are 3 key side-by-side comparisons of the 100 or more that have been found. Charan Singh, Words Eternal. The doctrine of karma is not against making any effort, but teaches us to be content when our efforts fail. Page 43. Gary Olson, Masterpath Book 2. The doctrine of karma is not against making any effort, but teaches us to be content when our efforts seemingly fail. Page 97. Charan Singh, Words Eternal. To lose our own identity and to become another being is love. Who are the true devotees of the Lord? Not those who know the most, but those who love the most. pp. 96-98. Gary Olson, Masterpath Book 2. to lose our own identity and to become another being, is love. Who are the true devotees of the Master? Not those who know the most, but those who love the most. Pages 99. Charan Singh, Words Eternal. Without divine grace, Satguru cannot be contacted. Without Satguru, Naam cannot be obtained. Without Naam, there can be no salvation. Such is the essence of the path of the Masters. In this world, we accept a reflection for real, a counterfeit for genuine, a piece of glass for a diamond. Pages 99 to 100. Gary Olson, Masterpath Book. 2. Without divine grace, the Satguru cannot be contacted. Without the Satguru, Shabda cannot be obtained. Without Shabda, there can be no liberation. Such is the essence of the Masterpath. In this world, we accept a reflection for real, a counterfeit for genuine, and a piece of glass for a diamond. Page 99. It appears that the key source material here for Gary Olson are 3 Radhasoami books: Discourses on Sant-Mat by Sawan Singh, The Path of the Masters by Julian P. Johnson, and Science of the Soul by Jagat Singh. Each contains extensive glossaries. Gary Olson used these books as part of his glossary material in his 3rd volume of Masterpath, The Divine Science of Light and Sound. In the letter of acknowledgement to his book, published in May 1999, 2,000 copies, Gary claims that Masterpath teachings mostly parallel the writings of Sawan Singh and other saints within the Sant-Mat tradition. However, Gary Olson neglects to mention that his book also copies, sometimes verbatim, from that same literature without direct references or quotes. The interested reader should keep in mind that the Radhasoami Bayas literature Masterpath Appropriates was published and copyrighted at least 3 decades before Olson's book. Ironically, Gary Olson also copyrights his own works, even the ones with extensive plagiarisms, with the declaration of all rights reserved. For more on this, see Sawan Singh, Discourses on Sant-Mat, Bayas Radhasoami Satsang 1963, Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas Radhasoami Satsang 1963, Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas Radhasoami Satsang 1963, Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas Radhasoami Satsang 1963, Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas Radhasoami Satsang 1963, Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas Radhasoami Satsang 1963, Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas Radhasoami Satsang 1963, Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas Radhasoami Satsang 1963, Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas Radhasoami Satsang 1963, Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas Radhasoami Satsang 1963, Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas Radhasoami Satsang 1963, Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas Radhasoami Satsang 1963, Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas Radhasoami Satsang 1963, Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas Radhasoami Satsang 1963, Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas Radhasoami Satsang 1963, Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas Radhasoami Satsang 1963, Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas Radhasoami Satsang 1963, Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas Radhasoami Satsang 1963, Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas Radhasoami Satsang 1963, Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas Radhasoami Satsang 1963, Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas Radhasoami Satsang 1963, Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas Radhasoami Satsang 1963, Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas Radhasoami Satsang 1963, Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas Radhasoami Satsang 1963, Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas Radhasoami Satsang 1963, Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas Radhasoami Satsang 1963, Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas Radhasoami Satsang 1963, Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas Radhasoami Satsang 1963, Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas Radhasoami Satsang 1963, Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas Radhasoami Satsang 1963, Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas, Radhasoami Satsang, 1963. Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas, Radhasoami Satsang, 1963. Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas, Radhasoami Satsang, 1963. Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas, Radhasoami Satsang, 1963. Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas, Radhasoami Satsang, 1963. Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas, Radhasoami Satsang, 1963. Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas, Radhasoami Satsang, 1963. Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas, Radhasoami Satsang, 1963. Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas, Radhasoami Satsang, 1963. Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas, Radhasoami Satsang, 1963. Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas, Radhasoami Satsang, 1963. Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas, Radhasoami Satsang, 1963. Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas, Radhasoami Satsang, 1963. Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas, Radhasoami Satsang, 1963. Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas, Radhasoami Satsang, 1963. Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas, Radhasoami Satsang, 1963. Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas, Radhasoami Satsang, 1963. Jagat Singh, Science of the Soul, Bayas, Radhasoami Satsang, 1960-1959. Julian P. Johnson's The Path of the Masters, Bayas, Sawan Service League, 1939, and Gary Olson's Master Path, The Divine Science of Light and Sound, Temecula, Master Path, 1999. When Gary Olson branched off to start his own movement, he systematically began to incorporate the writings of earlier Radhasoami gurus. His initial plagiarisms in the early 1990s were much more blatant. For example, in one case he didn't even bother to create his own cosmological map, but instead simply photocopied a chakra illustration directly from the Radhasoami publication call of the Great Master by Daryai Lal Kapoor and whited out the page citation. For a fuller analysis of Gary Olson's indebtedness to certain Radhasoami publications, refer to David Christopher Lane and Andrea Deem Lane, The Master Plagiarist, Gary Olson and Master Path. Walnut, Mount San Antonio College, 2020. What is intriguing from a sociological and historical perspective is to see the minor changes that Olson makes on the original text from which he copied his material. In Sample 1, for instance, he changes "when our efforts fail" to "when our efforts seemingly fail." In Sample 2, Olson replaces "true devotees of the Lord" to "true devotees of the Master." And in Sample 3, he replaces "Nam" with "Shabda" and "Path of the Masters" with "Master Path." These changes, though minor, demonstrate how certain ideas can be modified over time in ways that at first may not be noticed, but which may loom more significant later on, as we have seen with which sounds one is supposed to hear during meditation. Olson uses the word contemplation instead of meditation, and suggests that students listening to the sound current do so only 20 to 30 minutes a day, arguing that Radhasoami's insistence on 2.5 hours is too demanding and leads to disappointment when such a time allotment is not fulfilled. In this regard, Olson is following Eckankar's lead, which also uses the term contemplation and suggests less than half an hour for spiritual exercises. Today, Masterpath has attracted several thousand followers and keeps a relatively low-key profile, with Gary Olson only offering seminars to his initiates 3 to 4 times a year, along with maintaining a website with a special section for initiates only. 3. Darwin Gross and the Ancient Teachings of the Master, ATOM. When Darwin Gross, 1928 to 2008, appointed Harold Klemp, 1942, to present as the living Eck Master in 1981, he had no idea that 2 years later his successor would excommunicate him from Eckankar, ban his books from sale, and instigate a lawsuit against him for business impropriety and copyright infringement. But that is exactly what happened. In a personal and confidential letter dated January 4, 1984, Harold Klemp informed Darwin Gross of his removal from Eckankar. "The Order of the Vairagi Iki Masters no longer recognizes you as an Iki Master, As the agent of the ECK, I have removed all of your initiations in ECK, as well as terminated your membership in Eckankar. You are not capable or authorized to act or speak for or about the Vairagi Ek masters, Eckankar or the Ek teachings, nor are you to hold yourself out as an Ek master or Ek member. Do not directly or indirectly associate yourself or your activities with the sacred teachings of Ek or Eckankar in any way. I have refrained from coming forth with this pronouncement sooner for the sake of those new to the path and still setting their spiritual foundation. Dap Ren, spiritual name for Darwin Gross, served the Ek well at one time, but the negative forces were allowed in through lack of vigilance and discipline, causing spiritual decay. No one has done this to you. You have brought this upon yourself. David Christopher Lane, The Making of a Spiritual Movement. The Untold Story of Paul Twitchell and Eckankar, Del Mar Press, 1993, Revised Edition. Chapter 9. Naturally, Darwin Gross did not accept Klemp's excommunication, since it was Gross himself who appointed Klemp as the living Ek master. In a letter dated February 1984, and widely distributed amongst interested Ek Chelas, Darwin Gross presented his own version of the breach between Klemp and himself. Many individuals who are spiritually awake are concerned about the misguided information coming out of Menlo Park. The Vairagi masters do recognize me as a Vairagi master. My initiations cannot be removed by Harold or anyone else. Harold Klemp does not have that authority. He was given a spiritual responsibility, which he has lost. He no longer holds the rod of Ek power. Darwin Gross explains further that Eckankar has initiated legal action against me, dated August 20th, 1983, and I was forced to go out and find a lawyer in Portland. This is not the way of honorable and ethical human beings. People have been listening to misguided higher initiates, who have been told by Menlo Park to remove my pictures, destroy my writings, tapes and music. And this has not been authorized by me. It is under the control and guise of someone working in the psychic world. Neither Paul Twitchell nor I have planned any of this psychic negativism that has been coming out of Menlo Park. It smacks of control and fear. What has been happening is taking away the individual's freedom of choice. Those individuals who have been reporting psychic attacks and concern about magicians need to ask Divine Spirit or Sugmad, where is the spiritual protection that Ekist has? Have they been receiving spiritual protection from Harold Klemp? It does not appear so. See David Christopher Lane, 1993, Chapter 9. Darwin Gross did not prevail in the legal suits that were filed and established his own movement, which he eventually named with the acronym ATOM, Ancient Teachings of the Masters. He continued to teach the same Ek concepts, though he was forced to use different vocabulary to express them since Eckankar protected their trademark terms from infringement. Gross's group never became successful, attracting only a few hundred followers during his lifetime. He nevertheless offered a hierarchy of initiations, which followed the standard God Worlds chart, which Twitchell had developed in the Spiritual Notebook, 1970. Pierre Zoccatelli, in his article, Ancient Teaching of the Masters, Peter B. Clark, Encyclopedia of New Religious Movements, 2006, elaborates on Gross's belief system. The Master is guided spiritually by the teachers of the ancient teachings of the Masters, who, according to Atom, are mentioned in the Nakal archives hidden in Tibet, dating back about 35,000 years and emanating from the planet Venus. The teachings are studied at home by means of monthly installments, in discussion classes, or in satsang classes. In the first 6 months of studying the installments, the student receives his or her first initiation into the dream state. After 2 years of study, the student may receive the light and sound initiation, through which he/she may become part of the cosmic sound current. After 5 years or more, he/she becomes eligible to receive the soul initiation. The course of the initiation follows the God Worlds chart, composed of 13 levels, with a sound corresponding to each. For example, corresponding to the physical, astral, causal, mental and ethereal levels are respectively thunder, the ocean's roar, the sound of bells, the flow of water, and the buzzing of bees, and the sound words Alay, Kala, Aum, Mana, and Baju. When the individual has passed through the tunnel of Eureka and has entered the soul plane, he/she is free to move on his/her own. Beyond this world are invisible worlds, endless worlds, a God consciousness plane, the inaccessible, the nameless, the Sugmad Lok, and lastly the world of Sugmad. At these levels, starting from that of the soul, correspond the sounds and melodies of a single note of the flute, a strong wind, a deep singing with closed mouth, thousands of violins, music for wind instruments, the sound of a vortex, music of the universe, and music of God. The corresponding sound words are Sugma, Shanti, Hum, Aluk, Huk, Hu, and lastly, the unspoken word. Pierre Zoccatelli, Ancient Teachings of the Masters, in Peter B. Clarke's Encyclopedia of New Religious Movements, London, Routledge, 2006. Darwin Gross's following continued to dwindle after he left Eckankar, and his organization, ATOM, never achieved mainstream success. At public meetings, which were infrequent, there would be around 50 initiates and seekers in attendance. As Dodi Bellamy, a former Eckist, writing in 1995 for a cover story in the San Diego Reader, explains, Gross continues to work as a spiritual master, with a small group of devoted followers, many of them former Eckists. He publishes books through an organization called Be Good to Yourself, located in Las Vegas. Home study discourses and musical tapes are also available. Much of Gross's current teachings center around the easy listening jazz he performs on the Vibes. Gross's uplifting music is claimed to have miraculous healing powers. We take our seats among the 50 or so other seekers, many of whom have flown in for the event. Dawn is finishing an applied kinesiology demonstration of the power of Gross's music. A volunteer raises one arm straight out to the side, and Dawn easily pushes it down. Then she asks him to think about Gross's music as he again holds out his arm. This time the arm doesn't budge no matter how hard she pushes down on it. See, she exclaims. We close our eyes and chant Who together for several minutes. Gross enters and takes his position behind the gold-toned Vibes. Dodi Bellamy, former Eckankar, revisits the movement. Hi Fubi, this is Gakko, San Diego Reader, June 22, 1995. Since Darwin Gross's death in 2008, what remains of his organization is a simple website without much information. For more on this, see atom.org. However, Eckankar has continued to grow worldwide and has become one of the most visible new religious movements to have emerged out of the 1960s. 4. Jerry Mulvin and Internet Gurus. After Darwin Gross's departure, it led to an exodus of a number of Eckankar members, several of whom, like Gary Olson, started their own ministries. One of the first was Jerry Mulvin, who set up his organization in Manhattan Beach, California, but later moved his operation to Scottsdale, Arizona. He published 3 books which advertised his new path, The Divine Science of Light and Sound. Following closely the teaching of Eckankar, Mulvin explains in his first book, The Annals of Time, in November 1979 I received physical verification of mastership, my final initiation that had already taken place in the formless worlds. At long last, a meeting on the physical plane with my guardian angel. There he sat in plain view, Fubi Quantz. His eyes gleamed like mirrors and reflected me. My only thoughts were, I'm looking into the eyes of the Master. From that moment on, the great ones, Fubi Quantz and Rebazar Taz, have been the guiding force behind me. Jerry Mulvin, The Annals of Time, Manhattan Beach, The Divine Science of Light and Sound, 1982, page 25. Like his predecessors, Mulvin taught that listening to the sound current was the highest pathway to achieve enlightenment. He consciously connected with the previous Eckankar masters, but put a new spin on how and why the mastership had passed on to him. Instead of offering a series of initiations, Mulvin provides what he calls a connection. This is secured for a yearly membership fee of $100, roughly $275 in 2021. Jerry Mulvin's spiritual career, however, was seriously derailed when he was arrested in May of 1998 for having child pornography on his computer. Reported in the Arizona Republic, page 12, May 9, 1998. He has kept a low profile ever since. Eckankar, Masterpath, Atom, and the Divine Science of Light and Sound all request a financial payment for joining their respective groups, contrasting them with most of the Shabd yoga groups in India, which have no such monetary stipulations. However, the Radhasoami groups do accept donations, and this has generated tremendous income over the years. With the advent of the World Wide Web, as developed by Tim Berners-Lee, a new religious phenomenon occurred: the advent of internet gurus. These were individuals who had no formal organization, nor any significant following, but who went online and started their own ministries from scratch. A number of these internet gurus preached a version of Shabd Yoga. Included in this diversified assemblage are the late Michael Martin, Michael Turner, Sri Alan Feldman, Christopher Timms, Dwayne Hepner, and many others. While most of these individuals haven't garnered much attention or followers, they do represent how new technologies can open hitherto unknown markets. Essentially, anyone with a net presence, from a website to a Facebook account to a YouTube channel, can become a focal point to share their respective teachings. The ability to create one's own self-styled religious movement today is remarkably easy, though there is no assurance that it will be successful in garnering a significant following. Even whimsical groups, which at first appeared to be done in jest, have become popular, such as the Church of Jediism, see available online, and Temple of the Jedi Order, see available online. The fine line between a group that was created as a parody and one which seriously believes its own tenets is a fine one, and occasionally a naive believer may cross over from the former to the latter. For example, when I first heard of Dwayne the Great Writer, a surfer from Huntington Beach, and his many books touting the existence of Rebazatars, I thought it was done in jest, only to find out later that there are a number of very sincere disciples in his teachings. See the Kevin Smith's Facebook page, for example, devoted to Dwayne, the Great Writer. Vu 127 pet. Michael Turner is a good case in point. As far back as 1993, he began carving out his own path. As Andrea Deem, 1995, documents, Michael Turner, who had been a chela of Eckankar since the mid-1970s, eventually aligned himself with Darwin Gross's work, even serving as a facilitator for him and his ministry. However, in 1993, Turner started his own movement which he entitled the Sonic Spectrum. As Turner explains, since 1984, Sri Darwin Gross has taught a small coterie of chelas, probably less than 10,000 worldwide Sikh. The number is actually much lower, closer to several hundred, as their living Shabd Sat Guru. While I was indeed a chela of Sri Darwin's for many years, we severed all legal and contractual connections when I attained God realization and began teaching in late October 1993. This severance was a mutually agreed upon decision, which I initiated prior to my acceptance of mastership. Michael Turner offers instruction into Shabd Yoga, though without any of the restrictions that other groups have demanded. He occasionally gives satsang on the internet and in person, though the number of attendees is usually less than 10. Turner and others like him represent a new breed of gurus, where one becomes established simply by creating a website or having a YouTube presence. One wonders what will be next with the increasing adoption of virtual and augmented technologies. For more on how such technologies may influence the future development of religion, see the Avatar Project, Virtual Reality, AI, and the Future of Education. Walnut Mount San Antonio College, 2016. Yogi Bhajan and 3HO. One of the most visible new religious movements in North America to emerge out of the 1960s was the Healthy, Happy, and Holy organization, 3HO, founded by Harbhajan Singh Khalsa, 1929 to 2004. Formerly an airport customs inspector in Delhi, India, Yogi Bhajan, as he later became known, emigrated first to Canada and then began conducting yoga classes throughout North America. He created his own self-styled combination of Kundalini yoga and Sikh teachings, along with a variety of health practices, including vegetarianism. His followers adopted white turbans and outfits and became a notable presence in California and New Mexico. Yogi Bhajan and his wife, Bibi Inderjit Kaur, were followers of Baba Virsa Singh, but during a visit to India in 1971, there was a falling out. Pamela Sahara Dyson, Premka, indicates in her controversial book Premka, White Bird in a Golden Cage, Pamela Sahara Dyson, Premka, White Bird in a Golden Cage, My Life with Yogi Bhajan, Maui, Eyes Wide Publishing, 2019, that the split between Baba Virsa Singh and Yogi Bhajan was over two issues: 1. Money, and 2. Authority. Bhajan apparently didn't want to have his own students become aligned exclusively with Baba Virsa Singh, and was upset that the money he had brought with him for proper accommodations was not forthcoming. The Sikh influence in Yogi Bhajan's group became much more apparent after this trip to India, where many received the Amrit ceremony of initiation in Sikhism, and where they took on new names indicating their conversion. Yogi Bhajan's teachings incorporated the outward and inward chanting of mantras and listening to the inner sound current, much of it gleaned from his readings of Sikh scriptures in the Sri Guru Granth Sahib. If you have mastered your mantra, the final stage of that will be whether you are sitting, walking, or talking, you are hearing it. All the time you hear your own mantra in the atmosphere. If you master the sound current, you master the sound, that is, you master God. This is the gift, this is sound current. It's a permutation and combination of sounds which create waves to reach infinity, and the infinite brings infinite knowledge. For more on this, see Yogi Bhajan quotes on the sound current, available online. 3HO has centers throughout the world and offers a variety of classes, including a teaching specifically called Shabad Guru, which Yogi Bhajan has developed on the basis of his interpretation of Sikh scriptures. As he explains, the concept of the Shabad Guru is made in a very particular way. It is made in a very scientific way, and it is very arty. Every Shabad has a sound, and that sound directs the intellect. The process to change a man out of his graveyard and to bring him to light is to rotate the stem of the brain, which controls the vibratory continuous process of the intellect. The intellect gives you a thought on which intelligence is developed. The wisdom contains it, and your human effort fulfills it. That is how the process works. What happens when you read Guru Bani and pronounce it right is that you can change your whole everything, if you want to change. In 1974, Yogi Bhajan and Kirpal Singh became closely aligned at the Unity of Man conference held in Delhi, India. Bhajan recollects, "And I left all the way to India, and I asked him one thing which I loved in him. He said, 'Well, I am going to die next year. You take over.' And I said, 'Forget it. That's not my job. I'm not going to take over anything from anybody. I have to do what I have to do.' Then he said, 'Well, this is the idea. Would you try to be second with me in this time?' I said, 'All right, I'll do that.' And in the end I almost was convinced that he is a great man. And he asked me, he said, 'You don't believe in anybody except God, I mean to say. Human forms are very, I understand you, I know you,' because he knows me from very childhood. But I asked him one thing. I said, 'I have never seen a saint on whom saints believe. They all have their own territories and whole thing, you know.'" Quoted from Room Conversation with Yogi Bhajan. Refer to available online. 3HO has weathered a major scandal when Siri Singh Sahib Corporation commissioned an investigation into allegations of sexual and emotional abuse at the hands of Yogi Bhajan. The findings were released on August 13, 2020, and concluded that much of the alleged conduct more likely than not occurred. As described in more detail at the end of this letter, SSSC and its related organizations are taking immediate action to address the findings of the report, assist reporters of harm, and promote healing in our community. For more details on this remarkable report, especially since it was authorized by 3HO, see available online. It is not clear at this stage how 3H0 will be impacted in the long term, though early indications are that because the organization has acknowledged their leaders' transgressions and have tried to make amends, it may distinguish its many teachings programs from the founders' questionable lifestyle. Qinghai and Kuan Yin. One of the most popular Shabd yoga-related movements in the world today is Qinghai's God's Direct Contact, which teaches a meditation method known as Kuan Yin, where the initiate focuses on the inner light and sound. Hu Dang Trin, 1950, now honorifically called Qinghai, was born in Vietnam and later established her ministry in Taiwan. Because of her strong advocacy of veganism, Qinghai was the founder of Loving Hut restaurants, which now has over 200 locations in 35 countries. It is the most visible outreach of her ministry, and besides offering plant-based food and drink, serves as an informal introduction to Qinghai's teachings. For a sanctioned biography of Qinghai, refer to available online, and for a more critical analysis of her life and work, see available online. Qinghai was initiated into the sound current practice by Thakar Singh, 1929 to 2005, one of the claimed successors of Kirpal Singh. Because of this association, one which she has continually denied or downplayed, Qinghai adopted several of Thakar's ideas, including keeping a daily spiritual diary and foregoing all animal products. In addition, Qinghai mimics Thakur's and Kirpal's key selling point, that one will have a spiritual experience at the time of initiation. Although her meditation method is similar to that of Radhasoami, Qinghai describes her sitting practice as Kuan Yin, which is a spelling variation of Quan Shi Yin, the one that perceives the sounds of the world. The God Direct Contact official website clearly explains the initiatory process. The initiation into the Kuan Yin method is not an esoteric ritual or a ceremony for entering a new religion. During the initiation, specific instruction in meditation on the inner light and inner sound is given, and Master Qinghai provides the spiritual transmission. This first taste of divine presence is given in silence. Master Qinghai need not be physically present in order to open this door for you. The transmission is an essential part of the method. The technique themselves will bring little benefit without the grace of the Master. Because you may hear the inner sound and see the inner light immediately upon initiation, this event is sometimes referred to as sudden or immediate enlightenment. Qinghai asks her disciples to follow 5 precepts, which is almost exactly the same requirements that all Radhasoami-related movements ask of their members. The one exception is in Precept 5, where Radhasoami makes no stipulations about refraining from gambling, pornography, and excessively violent films or literature. 1. Refrain from taking the life of sentient beings. This precept requires strict adherence to a vegan diet. No meat, fish, poultry or eggs, fertilized or non-fertilized. 2. Refrain from speaking what is not true. 3. Refrain from taking what is not yours. 4. Refrain from sexual misconduct. 5. Refrain from using intoxicants. This includes avoiding all poisons of any kind such as alcohol, drugs, tobacco, gambling, pornography, and excessively violent films or literature. For more on this, see available online. Although Qinghai's teachings have often been compared to certain Mahayana schools of Buddhism, the fact remains that they share much more in common with Sant Mat and Radhasoami. Indeed, the very spiritual diary that she advised her followers to use was a verbatim copy of the one that Kirpal Singh and several of his successors, including Thakur Singh, Qinghai's one-time guru, advised their initiates to use. The exact diary and its various admonitions is available here, available online. Qinghai represents a new wave in those teaching sound current meditation, since she is the first female Shabd Yoga guru to have a worldwide following. Although the vast majority of her followers are Asian, she has attracted seekers from almost all nationalities and ethnic heritages. Qinghai has also made Shabd Yoga accessible to a new audience because of her ability to connect with Chinese and Vietnamese diasporic communities. By connecting to her Buddhist background and calling her meditational technique Kuan Yin versus the Indian-laden term Shabd or Nad Yoga, Qinghai has legitimized listening to the inner sound current as a practice that dovetails with the teachings of Buddha and his millions of followers, available online, the sound current in Jainism and Buddhism. While listening to the sound current is prevalent in Sufism, Nathism, Santism, Radhasoami and various related movements, there are also select schools of Jainism and Buddhism that incorporate Nad Shabd Yoga into their meditational disciplines. For example, Acharya Sushil Kumar, 1926 to 1994, a well-known Jain leader who established the first Jain Tirtha or pilgrimage center, Siddhachalam in North America, advocated the practice of Aham Yoga. As Pravin K. Shah elaborates, Guruji was a self-realized master, well known for his practice of effects of sound on spiritual progress, and his teachings of the Aham Yoga system. Aham Yoga is an ancient system for the mastery of the inner self through watchfulness and direct perception. It encompasses all aspects of philosophy and yogic practice in the Arihant tradition. It includes the 8 steps of yoga, sound vibration, healing, awakening of the kundalini and all divine powers, color science, holistic health, the concepts of ahimsa, anekantvad, and the perfection of the soul. This knowledge is based on the Matrika Vidya of the Namakar mantra, which is the foremost mantra in the Jain tradition holding much secret knowledge. Acharya Sushil Kumar understanding of Aham Yoga may have been influenced, at least in part by his close association with Kirpal Singh, Darshan Singh, and other Shabd Yoga mystics, including Baba Fakir Chand, who were also strong advocates of listening to the inner sound current. In my personal interview with Acharya Sushil Kumar back in 1983, At his temporary residence in Long Beach, California, he remarked that listening to the sound current had a long tradition in India and was known among Jain leaders and monks, though not widely publicized. He was intensely interested in making Jain doctrines and spiritual aspirations much more accessible to an educated populace that had turned away from religion and had adopted a more scientific approach to life. The Jain leader wanted to seek the unity of all religions, and in that spirit he saw that the essence of ahimsa, non-violence, and anekantavada, holding multiple viewpoints, were universal ethical ideals. The interview was first published in the Movement newspaper, Los Angeles, 1983, and parts of it were late, excerpted in a small book commissioned to honor Acharya Sushil Kumar's 25th death anniversary. See David Christopher Lane, A Beacon of Light, Walnut, Mount San Antonio College, 2019. In the first interview, Kumar explained that the key to ending war was to transcend the self and the feeling of others being different. Instead, he argues for finding the source from which all violent tendencies spring forth. If that area becomes our focus, he contends, then the question of a third world war would not even arise, much less the weapons in preparation for it. But what is it that drives us towards aggression? Is it biologically pre-programmed? Does environment, via our social structures, breed it? I had planned to pose these very questions to Sushil Kumar, but within 5 minutes from our initial meeting, he had already answered them in a brilliant fashion. His response, which is echoed in the ancient Upanishads, is perhaps simpler than one might expect. Wherever there is an other, fear arises. It is the emergence of the separate self, the I-ness, the egoic structure, which is at the heart of man's cruelty, Sushil Kumar stated. With the advent of self-awareness, there also comes the presumption of what is not self, and all of that, the environment, the world, them, generates fear. This fear drives human beings to protect the self from all that threatens its separate existence. But such a strategy can only end in failure and a lifelong narcissism, a denial of the universe and what it offers. Paradoxically, the more one tries to retain the self, the more one eventually loses it in the fight against the not-self, the world. A tragic double bind indeed. What is the solution? There's only one, Sushil Kumar postulates. Give up the false idea of an independent self, and begin to see the creation as one indivisible whole. There are also aspects of Nad Yoga in Buddhism, though not nearly as explicit as in Sant Mat and Sikhism. It also provides instructions that the aspirant should find the source from which the sound arises, which ultimately is in the no sound or stillness. Ajahn Sumedho, author of The Way It Is, Ajahn Sumedho, The Way It Is, Amaravati Publications, 1991, and former abbot of the Amaravati Buddhist monastery in the United Kingdom, argues that the sound of silence is an elemental meditation practice. Some Buddhist monks and scholars argue that the Surangama Sutra in Buddhism contains Nad Yoga teachings, though how to properly interpret this text is still open to varying interpretations. Ananda and all you who listen here should inward turn your faculty of hearing to hear your own nature, which alone achieves supreme bodhi. That is how enlightenment is won. Buddhas as many as the Ganges sand entered this one gateway to nirvana. All past Tathagathatas have achieved this method. Ajahn Sumedho and Ajahn Amaro admit that they were influenced in their understanding of sound current yoga by Edward Salim Michael, 1921 to 2006, a distinguished musical composer who is the author of The Law of Attention, Nada Yoga and the Way of Inner Vigilance. Edward Salim Michael, The Law of Attention, Nada Yoga and the Way of Inner Vigilance, Inner Traditions, 2010. Amaro connects the practice to earlier Buddhist meditations when he writes, listening to the inner sound brings the heart into a position of acute inner awareness. It is not that the inner sound has some magical property. Rather, it is that bringing of the alert mind, bringing openness and receptivity to sound, is symbolic of the presence of ultimate truth. The sound is always there. We don't have to create it. It is featureless. It is ever present. So it is a good symbol for ultimate reality itself. In the sutra, the Buddha praised this method, the meditation on listening, as the best method for enlightenment. Ajahn Sumedho had been teaching the meditation on the nada sound for some years, so he was tickled by this connection to another Buddhist tradition. He hadn't realized that there had been so much emphasis on this in traditional Buddhist meditation practices. Because of the efforts of the Amaravati Monastery and Publication Department, the practice of Nada Yoga has become more widely discussed in Buddhist circles, and there is a continued effort to find how listening to the inner sound current is resonant with Buddha and Buddhism in the quest to achieve nirvana. Conclusion. Today, listening to the inner sound current is a well-established practice across a number of religious movements, old and new. The technical aspects of Shabd Yoga are no longer an esoteric secret known only to the privileged few. Shabd and Nad Yoga has a long tradition, as we have seen, dating back to the pre-Vedic period in India, and is a transcultural phenomenon which is not restricted to any one country or ethnicity. However, there remain a number of questions concerning how to best interpret the inner sound current, with believers and skeptics positing different theories. These range from the purely reductionistic, noises in the head are symptoms of tinnitus, to the transcendent, divine music that leads to enlightenment. What should not be overlooked here is that there are a spectrum of possibilities concerning the various sounds one hears during meditation, since even acknowledged masters of the tradition, such as Sawan Singh of Radhasoami Satsang Bayas, readily admit that some sounds are merely local or due to purely physiological causes. Even if Shabd or Nad is explained via the brain and the nervous system, it does not therefore mean it is a singular sensation, since there are grosser and subtler variations in what one hears. Some sounds are musical and uplifting and generate tremendous bliss, whereas others cause anxiety and even headaches. Simply put, a truly scientific understanding of Shabd Nad Yoga is still in its infancy. What is perhaps most intriguing is to see how consistent the technical aspects of listening to the inner sound current have been since time immemorial. Essentially, it is the closing of one's ears, so the aspirant can better hear what has hitherto mostly gone by unnoticed. The process for doing this is usually twofold. 1. Assuming a squatting position, such as the Malasana posture, and using the knees as leverages to rest one's elbow, freeing the thumbs to plug both ears. 2. Using a T-stick or Bragan, in SRF it is known as an AUM board, and resting the elbows on each side to make it easier to plug both ears with one's hands. There are other methods, such as simply sitting quietly and not using the hands to ward off outer noises, but these are usually employed after one has become adept at hearing the inner sound current during most hours of the day. It is perhaps a bit surprising to learn that these simple techniques have been cloaked in secrecy among a number of spiritual movements for centuries, as if knowing how to correctly listen to the Shabd is a taboo subject and should only be taught to those who are deserving of initiation. Indeed, one of the selling points of many sound current movements, such as Radhasoami and Eckankar, is that becoming a member of their organization will allow the neophyte to have access to arcane knowledge that they could not receive otherwise. One of Kirpal Singh's selling points was that he could actually confer experiences of light and sound during meditation to his students, suggesting that a master of the tradition has the ability to directly transmit glimpses of the transcendent. But after his death, with so many successors claiming to have the same spiritual power, it became obvious that it was the meditator herself, and not the initiating guru, who was generating the inner fireworks. The esteemed Shabd Yoga master, Baba Fakir Chand, 1886 to 1981, was adamant that gurus and master have no such power, and that their respective students wrongly impute powers on them that they do not have. In his view, it was the faith and belief of the disciple, not the teacher, who was doing the heavy lifting. For more on Baba Fakir Chand's perspective concerning Shabd Yoga, refer to the edited volume by David Christopher Lane, The Unknowing Sage, The Life and Work of Baba Fakir Chand, Walnut, Mount San Antonio College, 2015. From a neurological perspective, one can reframe Fakir's argument and suggest that it was the brain's own potentiality to engender magnificent experiences of light and sound. Clearly, the early Indian writings on the subject, from the Nadabindu Upanishad to the Hatha Yoga Pradipika to the Garanda Samhita, have had a significant influence on later yoga movements, particularly in articulating what sounds one should attend to during meditation. In modern times, the most influential books on the subject have been Madame Blavatsky's Voice of Silence, 1889, Julian P. Johnson's The Path of the Masters, 1939, and With a Great Master in India, 1934, Kirpal Singh's Crown of Life, 1973, and Naam or Word, 1974, Paul Twitchell's The Tiger's Fang, 1967, and most recently, Edward Salim Michael's The Law of Attention, Nada Yoga and the Way of Inner Vigilance, 2010. It appears relatively certain that Shabd Yoga meditation and its various iterations will continue to become more popular in the future, depending in part on the success of such new religious movements such as Qinghai's Kuan Yin teachings, Radhasoami and its various branches, and the emergence of non-sectarian groups that promote listening to the inner sound without requiring initiation or following a guru. Technology can also play a key role with the advent of new meditational aids, such as brain-sensing headbands which provide the meditator with instant feedback. In addition, virtual and augmented reality headsets are primed to offer new pathways for deeper sound current meditations, since they can provide environments conducive for one-on-one digital instruction, guided by preset and adaptable, artificially intelligent algorithms. With mindfulness meditation and other forms of relaxation becoming increasingly popular around the world, we should expect that Shabd Yoga-related movements will continue to flourish, though perhaps in ways we cannot yet predict.